Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
We'll call the select board meeting to order. There's a Zoom application on the agenda and the call-in for the meeting ID. We're in the lower theater and should have a long agenda tonight, so try and move things along. First order of business is to approve the minutes of December 6th, 2022. They're in your packet. Take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion is made and seconded to approve the minutes of December 6th, 2022. Any corrections, additions, deletions, or omissions?
The only thing that's goofed up, it says prepare for the joint board on November.
Yeah, the next, this is 2022. Yeah, 29. Should be January.
Yeah, January 3rd.
Okay. That being said, anything else? All right, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and or pressing matters that will require ratification at a future meeting.
I have no
none.
addition. No,
You have any, Scott?
no addition.
Any board? Nope. All right, let's move down to public comment on items not on the agenda. 3 minutes per person. Well, I see none. Left the board, so let's move to the manager's report.
Thank you. So a couple things since our last meeting. There will be a showing of Call to Duty. If you remember, that was the video production that was done by Fact TV. And that's going to be shown on the 29th of December at 7 o'clock in the Opera House. It's going to be a free showing. They're just asking for donations at the door. If people want to come, if they missed it the last time around. It will be shown again on the 29th. A couple things. We talked last time about the shed and the tire shed and you've been to the recycling center. You might notice that the old wooden structure is gone. So thank you to the highway department. Came and tore it down, put in a new base and compacted it. So that's ready to go. You can't notice it's under the snow at the moment, but we do have a contractor that'll be building a new pavilion. And so we're hopeful to see that coming in the next few weeks. You'll start to see some progress on that. And there'll be a new area for tires and for food scraps. So,
Food scraps are in the building right now currently, as you get into right there, so.
we pushed it back a little bit just to give some more room because it gets a little crowded in there as people are dropping things off and driving around. So I think it'll be pushed back slightly, but it'll give you some more room, I think, to maneuver through there. So when it's rebuilt, I think you might notice that it's pushed back a bit. And then finally, again, the highway folks, and a lot of thanks to Andy. We've been working with a contractor on streetlights in the downtown. And we've had problems trying to get the ballast replaced. We talked about, we had a fix. Contractor was working with the local tech school to get those ballast, they're basically discs. And then we were resetting LED bulbs in the existing ballasts. So as opposed to roughly $1,800 per bulb, it turned out to be closer to $350. We were just paying for the bulbs, and the school actually was just manufacturing these discs and paid for the guys for the install. So we did roughly 15 to 16 of them the Friday before the storm. So if you have gone downtown, if you noticed, you just want to check to see the brightness and the condition. The bulbs are programmable, so there are settings on the bulbs. And right now, we still have more work to do. As Andy said, I think there's 70 some odd all in total. So eventually we'll swap them all out. But at least for this time of the year, when it's so dark in the early evening, we have so many people down with shopping and holidays. It is a noticeable improvement to have those replaced. So I do appreciate the effort to get those done. So that was it.
One question. About the street lamp replacement. I'd kind of like everybody to just take a look at the lamps. I feel that we should start converting over to warm fixtures, something with approximately 3,000 Kelvin, we call it. It's the next notch down. It's not a difference in brightness, it's just a difference in the color of the bulb. I think that what we have now is too glaring. It has a little bit of blue tint. And the warmer color just looks a lot nicer on the buildings and on the street. It's just less glaring. I think we a lot more in character with the character of our downtown. And I think it's just a matter of just flipping the switch on the bulbs, because the ones that we got have different settings. So I kind of like us just have a consensus of preference. I think we have mentioned it before, but I just kind of like, you know, if we could just make a decision, you know, and just, you know, give the manager just a preference of what we want to do.
Do you need a motion from that, Elijah?
I don't know, can we do that right
Now
now?
on
or
the
is that-
agenda for action, so we're gonna have a motion.
Okay.
Just be a consensus.
Consensus for warmer color temps.
When, a little history, when those lights were set up, my wife was on that committee, and they were running around, not whether they wanted the glaring lights or the warm fixtures, and they did decide on the warm fixtures, but the only way you notice their difference is if you go down, and if I drove through last night, my wife and I both came in. If you got an older bulb and a newer bulb in there, you can tell the difference right off quick, because one's brighter than the other. Now, I don't know how those switch lights on those work, but I don't know what's involved, but you know, my opinion would be this, if they start to fail, then the newer ones, and we replace them with a warmer light, but I mean, I hate to take them all out and try and, because we spend a lot of money putting them in. I don't know how much it costs to put them in there, but if we can do it with a switch, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't know what's involved there.
Yeah, you can sort of get an idea if you look at the last new street lamp that we installed on Canal Street. We bought the one with the warmer light. So it gives you a contrast between the existing bulbs with the cooler light and the new one that we got with the warmer light. I personally think the warmer is just so much nicer. It's just the same brightness. There's no difference in brightness. It's just aesthetics.
So what are you saying? A switch? They have a switch?
On the bulbs that we're installing now to replace all the ones that were burned out, they just have a setting and choose what color to make the bulbs.
So how come that wasn't done when they put them in? To match the old ones?
We did match the old ones,
The old ones are brighter.
correct. We matched the old color.
So are you saying that the older ones are probably weaker than the new ones, and that's what's causing the issue?
It's not a difference of the brightness. The new bulbs that we're putting in, you can't tell the difference between one of our existing bulbs and the new bulb. They're exactly the same brightness, same color. But I just think that we should start transitioning into the warmer color, same brightness, different color. It's just a more of a yellow color and not blue.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I have eyesight problems
Mhm.
and I cannot stand a white LED
Yeah.
bulb. Burns out my eyeballs.
So what's the consensus of the board? What do you want to do? We're not gonna replace them all. I don't think we should be looking at replacing all the ones that they put in. I think there were 16 of them put in.
Yep.
Out of 21. There's still a few that are missing, but they were still out.
But we'll be doing a lot more for the next couple of years because all the existing ones are failing one by one.
Well, as
So
I say, if they
we're going to
as they
keep
fail,
replacement.
But I think we should support Elijah's suggestion.
Yeah.
We can. And I agree with you, Peter, that we replace them as they burn out.
Right.
We're wasting a lot of money.
Right.
Okay, anything else on that? Oh, you got anything else? Are you
No,
finished?
that was it. Yep, all good.
Hey, anyone have any questions, manager? No? All right, let's move on to the agenda. appointment of interim zoning administrators. Many of you may or may not have heard, Chuck is leaving us as of the 27th, I think, if I remember the minutes from the Springfield board. We appointed him and he's leaving the 22nd, his first day is supposed to be the 27th. So that being said, I'll let Scott take it from here. She's got
Right,
some-
so we asked VLCT for some guidance on that because it is somewhat of a structured requirement as to how that position is ultimately permanently assigned. And for an interim or an acting, you have the right to appoint someone up to a period of a year, and then there would have to be a process involving the planning commission and ultimately a recommendation back to the full board for a permanent appointment down the road. But at least it would give us some coverage in the interim so that we can continue having meetings, processing zoning applications, processing other required items, moving along town plan, a few other items that need to continue until we can at least go through. We have a draft of a updated job description, and we got to talk about some of the options with that. You know, in Chuck's case, we had shared the zoning and also the health officer portions of the job, and I think it created conflicts at times. It created some difficulty, you know, when you're doing the enforcement end as well as trying to do the administration and the zoning requirements, and also supporting the boards. I think there were times when it was very difficult to do all three well. No reflection on Chuck. I think it's just a reality of trying to, you know, the dichotomy of, you know, some of those problems. So I think it might make sense to at least just hire a zoning administrator, a specific position, and then look to split out somebody to do inspection and enforcement, at least starting as a part-time position, and as we develop it over time to see how that might go. If we have to eventually grow it to full-time, if we get into things like supporting our rental ordinance and a few other things, or rental housing inspections, et cetera, we can look at those impacts and make adjustments if we need to. But I think the idea is to hide, you know, since we have this opportunity, is to try to split those responsibilities and see what we can do.
We do have a health officer, deputy health officer, Sean McGinnis. And he is registered with the state. We checked that before we, so it's not like we're hanging ourselves up dry here. Point of history, I know Deb may want to speak on this, but I mean, when Chuck was hired, we went 3 months or so without a zoning administrator before we hired Chuck. So just so keep in mind that there's no need to really rush into something unless there's pending applications that need to be taken care of. Deb, you have something you want to talk about? I see your hands up.
My hand's not up. That's my speaker off.
What?
Only that I have concerns with the duties that are already assigned to Chief McGinnis as our fire chief at the fire department, and what happens with his ability to perform. I'm not even aware of exactly how much and of what besides fire safety he deals with Chuck. So that's further conversation that's needed. And indeed, if that's the case and he's needed more for town issues, that'll have an impact on budget for you guys. So that's it.
As I recall, Sean gets a stipend for assisting Chuck.
That's correct.
So that will remain as his compensation.
Yeah, still it's in the budget, for sure,
Okay.
going forward.
All right. And then the next question is the website that Chuck manages. What are your thoughts on that, Scott?
Well, we don't have a real manager of the website. He helps with a lot of the aspects of just changing out stuff. Gary does some stuff, but we're gonna have a real difficulty. We need somebody with GIS background. There's a lot of things that we need to plug holes in. So I'm not sure we can address all of that in just one swoop. I think we have to keep our eyes on the zoning piece first and then deal with gaps that we're gonna have and try to figure it out as we go forward.
I volunteered before to teach somebody on staff how to just do updates on that site.
Well, Scott's memo here, it does say that he's recommending to appoint Gary Fox. I have some concerns with that appointment. And the fact that Gary's got enough stuff on his plate now.
Yeah, I do too.
How is he gonna handle that job? Plus, if you look in the budget, there's a line item that's been added as an executive assistant in the development office, so something's afoot here. We can wait till we get the budget of that, but, you know, I don't know what the board wants to do. I mean, it's up to you guys.
Would it be okay to ask Gary what his thoughts are on
Sure. Sitting there, Michael, you know.
it?
Sure, so.
Try to wake you up.
So when Scott, when Scott brought it up and we were discussing it, just called around a little bit. Some other towns like White River Junction has the development and the planning together. There's, it's more typical actually to have those done jointly than to have them separately. And there is a lot of functionality overlap. So there are some things that make sense about it. Workload wise, we have been ramping up with as more projects and grants are successful, there's more work, and Betsy has been working in the office and has been getting skilled up more and more as we've gone along, and that makes a huge difference in just being able to, a lot of the time-consuming work is really the administrative pieces, just all kinds of, every time you're successful with the grant, there's that much work to do along the way. And so I do think that structurally, we are positioned to be able to do this.
Well, would you say planning and development, that makes sense. But what about all the zoning stuff?
Yeah, so the zoning generally comes under planning, right? I mean, it's a-
Right, but
it's a
I mean,
planning
I know,
appointment.
I'm kind of familiar with it.
Yeah, right, you did that for a while,
On
so,
the planning,
so
chair
yes,
of the planning commission.
yes, and
You know, there's just constant flow of zoning applications and zoning quarrels and, you know, that's really kind of different from the planning aspects of it.
sure, and so when I was referring to the other places in the planning and development functions, the zoning is a planning function, the permitting and the land use. So,
They just have one person doing all that?
no, they don't, but they have a lot larger population and catchment area. So I said White River Junction, but it's really the town of Hartford.
Mhm.
They have 5, fairly significant villages there.
Right, yeah. So are you saying that if you had an assistant or someone on staff other than just you could handle all this without too much trouble?
Well, from what we went through today, of course, it's hard to say without doing it, but what Chuck and I have gone through over the last week and the way that he's set things up, he's automated a lot of that functionality with kind of like macros, template forms, merge things in. Yeah, I do think that it's workable.
Well, you know, I was talking to him the other day, and this is a slow time of year for that
Right.
right now, but like the spring, the zoning stuff.
Yeah, so the picture could change in the spring, and I would not hesitate to call out if it looks like that's happening.
Help.
Plus, we're gonna be recruiting, don't forget. It's not like we're gonna just stop. It just
Right.
gives us the ability to keep, you know,
Yeah, there is.
some level of
There is
activity.
an advertisement going out,
Good.
looking for one. I don't know where it's gonna be placed. I emailed looking to find out, and I assume if VLCT is gonna be the first one of the, because those are free. But
Right.
Indeed, I don't know, and I don't know if we're putting any in the local papers.
I mean, the reason we held back is because I don't want to put out an advertisement for a zoning administrator / health officer if we're going to separate these functions. I would rather ask for, you know.
We have time to figure it out.
We do.
Well, the other thing is that too, is the DRB and I don't think the planning commission had a lot of input into what's going on. So I suggested that Debbie, myself, and I think it's Pat Moyne that's still the chair of the DRB to get together and hack something out as, you know, Gary's acting, and then, so we can see if we're getting the right person, so. I mean,
And what's the schedule of the revision of the town plan at this point? I mean, when I looked on the website, it said they were gonna start having public hearings in 2022.
A lot of the writing in the chapters have been done and a lot of the work has been done. I think now it's a question of process more so than the actual research and writing.
Deborah should be able to tell us, she's chair of the planning commission.
If you want, yeah, if you want my input, we're at the end polishing piece on all the chapters, pretty much. The introduction has not been done. The maps have not been included. The links have not been included. I know that Chuck was working, seeing what he could get done this week. But that's still a lot of input required by the zoning administrator to get that to the stage where it's going to come back to you guys. And then we start the hearing process. I realized, COVID took a lot longer than we wanted it to, but it looks good. But there's some things still missing. I will get in touch with Chuck tomorrow, see where he is. He and I were working together on the introduction and then plugging in all the maps and everything. That was a concern, where we are with that. Our next step, of course, was to look at these zoning bylaws. That was the next after the town plan was completed, and look at concerns over making amendment recommendations and that sort of thing. I'm not sure where that's headed at this point with an interim. So also, the last thing was I understood that Jack used to take all the minutes for the meetings. It looks like we don't have that ability anymore after this week. So that's just a minor concern of the boards, of the commissions themselves. So.
the information that's gonna be ready for the board to make to have their meetings needs to be done ahead of time. It can't be done the night of the meeting and then have it plunked in front of them.
I mean, I think timing wise, it actually works if we do go out and do this recruitment and find a good candidate, because with the area wide plan and some of the other proposed changes, I think it's just gonna seamlessly move into that next stage, which will look at zoning and overlays and some opportunities to talk about, what do you want to do if you want to implement portions of that.
All right, so what's the board's pleasure? Table, go ahead, make a
Well, I
motion.
think we should go ahead. I mean, it's just interim at this point, and it
Correct.
seems like we need to have somebody in that
Basically,
position.
this way, do we have any other options?
Yeah, we
right now
don't.
for-
Well, you can leave it vacant and we can cancel meetings. I mean, that's
No, we
the other
don't.
option,
I don't even want to do that.
right?
I mean, people are gonna start, I mean, there may be a slow season, but people will be thinking ahead for spring very soon, so.
Right.
There is activity in January, actually, too, and for this transitionary period.
I'd like to move that we accept Scott's proposed approach.
Does that include making a part-time position for health officer? Should we
No.
be voting on that now?
No,
No.
the idea is we would be recruiting for a zoning administrator, and there's a job description that I've circulated, just a beginning aspect of it. And then the idea would be we'd have to look at a town health officer as the second piece, so we talk about that.
Okay, two
Separate.
separate things.
And one addition, I think it should be contingent upon providing Gary with more assistance, more of Betsy's hours, basically. Is that?
Yeah, we'll get some more administrative support, and then I'm also hopeful that when, the assistant position, we get that filled, can also fill some of that gap as well.
So I think you have to make a motion, that's at the point, Gary.
Okay.
Yes.
I move that per municipal manager's proposal, we appoint Gary as our interim zoning and zoning
I
administrator.
think it's just zoning.
Just zoning administrator.
Correct.
We hear a second.
So I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Gary Fox as the interim zoning administrator. Any further discussion? Questions? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
All right.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Peter, do you think Ellen would be interested in the?
Nope, don't even go there. Don't even go there.
And Peter, I'd like to make a motion, or not make a motion, but just to state how much we've appreciated Chuck's work over the years.
Yeah,
He really worked very hard and has handled a lot of difficult situations, so I just want to.
Yeah.
go on record.
Kudos to do where necessary, so. All right, let's move on to appoint a moderator for town meeting. We did put out notice of vacancy advertisement. We got one response from Paul Bohosky. And read that response to you. It says, this email is inform you and the select board that I would be interested in being appointed town moderator for the 2023 town meeting. I feel that I do have the experience to function in the position, as I've been the village moderator for at least for the last 4 to 5 years. Thank you for your consideration. Paul, I think, also was sub on the town
He has, yeah.
once or twice, so he's familiar with the situation. And unfortunately, he's the only one we've got, so, and I understand that he is going to be on the ballot as continuing in that position, so once he's appointed, he can run and go from there, so take a motion.
What Paul Oczowski to the position of town monitor.
You can- Sorry.
You could dim the lights.
Wait a second, that motion.
The lights.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Paul Wolski as the town moderator for town meeting. All those in favor would say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Here comes the big one, folks. Budget review. Updated general fund budget. Before we get started, there's a new printout for pages 16, 17, 18. It's a highway budget. There were some errors in there that I caught going through this the other day, and Alyssa's been notified and corrected them. So hopefully, I'll leave it to Scott and Alyssa to battle it off.
Sure, I wanted to call your attention, one of the items I put in there was an updated schedule. And if you notice at our next meeting, we're gonna go through some, obviously we have a whole host of things to cover tonight. The next meeting, the state usually gives Paul the updated 411 as well as the CLA information, so we'll have that for you, which gives you some sense of what that tax rate might be. We'll have to finalize all our budget and articles for the town meeting. I thought we'd have one more bite of this at the 17th, but when Alyssa and I did sat down and did the calendar, we'd be 2 days short if we waited till the 17th to do the final adoption of the warning. So we're gonna have to make sure that by the 3rd, we get everything done, or else we'll have to do a special meeting. To meet the required publications for printing the town report, as well as getting all of the required notices out for warning. And then town meeting is actually early this year, so it's the 7th of March. So when we looked at the calendar.
Okay, are we ready to begin?
So that is a backdrop.
Just a couple items. Page 1, the notation on the side on the far right says increase 9142. That's an anticipated increase in taxes,
That's what we're at so far, yes, with the way it is right now,
the way you have it printed out.
for the general, yes, yeah.
Yeah, general fund. And I think there's a reduction in the highway fund of about 34,000, I think. Or something. So total increase is 60,000, which is a penny, and we can kind of offset that if we have to with a little bit more of a fund balance, but I'll let Melissa and Scott get into that. Does anybody have any questions in particular on the pages?
Well, I want to point out a couple things to you, just so that you're aware that on the second page under the national opioid settlement, right now, we have not shown any additional revenue. There is more money coming. They do these sort of periodic updates. So right now, we didn't forecast any revenue. It's a 0. If you remember, we had 2 allocations previously, and had a request for one of our public agencies to use that money for some outreach work. So the board had approved that previously.
Right.
So there was no carryover money. We just got a more recent mailer from them saying that there'll be some additional monies coming. And those settlements are now with drug distributors, not drug manufacturers. So there's more money in the pipeline. And there's a series of payments that are coming from the distributors as well. So you will see money coming at some point during next year's budget. We just didn't have any real numbers to plug in. So that's why it's showing as a 0, just for that item there. Since we last met on that second page as well, we went through recreation with Brian to do some updates. So there's a few changes, not anything of any drama or dramatic changes in terms of his programming or what he's planning. He has to do some potential work there's some leaks again in one of the pool lines. And so we're hopeful that if the weather cooperates in the spring, we might be able to do some digging. We'll work with them and see if we can assist them with that. Otherwise, we have to hire a contractor. And that might increase his expenses, but we'll let you know. We've got to get through the winter and then see how we look as things come forward in the spring. So that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on. All of the other, again, we've gone through all the other major items with the theater. So I think we're pretty good. There was really no significant changes from there. I think the one thing that was different that I wanted to point out to you on page 4, and I think Alyssa wanted to make sure that we were all aware that in the 23 budget, we had assigned $100,000 from fund balance to help offset some of 2023's budget. That number carried forward in 24 as well. If you remember, just on your draft audit, you had a $200,000 positive contribution to surplus. So even if you did propose on this budget that 100,000, you still will be in beyond the required percentages from that standpoint in terms of your fund balance. And just wanted to point that one out to you as well.
Is there any room for negotiating any more use of the fund balance that we want?
Absolutely.
Huh?
You're well beyond.
I know that, but I'm just trying to think of keeping the tax rate level. And we don't even know.
We just did that to carry the number forward.
Oh, yeah.
but
Yeah, I
That certainly
understand.
is up for
Yeah,
discussion.
It
I just-
helps because it does get that out there.
Right, I
so.
just wanted to point that out to the board, just so that everybody was aware of the thinking on that. A couple of other sort of large items that are still somewhat unresolved, one of those being our contract for our ambulance services. We carried that same number forward. We're still in conversations about how we want to deal with ambulance services in 24 and beyond. So those conversations are ongoing, a little bit, say misleading, but maybe incomplete, because we just didn't have information to share with the newspaper. So the idea that we won't have ambulance coverage is not a concern. The question is how, which provider and when that change might occur. Just for a point of reference, and we're working to see what other options might be available. In the first 4 months of this current year, budget year, we had 57 Walpole responses to a mutual aid for ambulance, which is not how mutual aid is supposed to work in relationship to ambulance services. It's supposed to be a sort of fill in and for extreme situations, not for routine everyday coverages. So
What do we average a day? Do you have a sense of that?
we do. Sean and I have been working on the numbers, trying to get a sense of just where we are with runs. So he was working with Keen. So far, and again, this is not a complete year, right? There's been 747 EMS calls in the town.
47.
We've had 491 in Bellows Falls, 139 in Rockingham, and 117 in Saxons River. The thing that we're looking at is trying to break out of those calls, how many times were there simultaneous calls? So multiple calls for service that were overlapping. We came up with about 69 times where that had occurred. And they don't all relate to the times we called out for additional coverages. So it's not that 67 number of mutual aid, or I'm sorry, it's not 67, it was 58 times, not 67 for Walpole. Does not relate directly to those overlapping calls. And then there are some calls that relate in Saxons River to their contract with Athens. And at this point, we're still not sure of the status of that, but just of the current year, 32 calls so far of the 117 for Saxons River were specific to Athens. So.
Question, Scott. Who makes the decision about how much equipment to bring out? Sometimes I see a fender bender and there are 12 trucks there. I'm just wondering, how do we grade the response level so it isn't as expensive to the town?
It really depends when it's called into dispatch, you know, if there's multiple vehicles involved until somebody is on scene and does an evaluation. They'll continue with depending upon how it's called in initially. And then it escalates as somebody comes on scene and might find that there's, you know, significant multiple problems. Sometimes, depending upon where you see the scene too, they'll use some of those extra pieces of equipment as blocking apparatus, and then they can work more safely around the accident scene. Unfortunately, people don't pay great attention, and it's dangerous to be out and about working in the highways, especially on the interstates. So there are definitely times when they just call out apparatus just to provide, you know, a barrier, a physical barrier, so they can work on the scene.
The article that was in the Reformer today stated that we got no responses from the RFP that went out for ambulance services from either Golden Cross or RFP. Do we, just so the public knows that we're not gonna be left out there hanging if there's an emergency call someplace, or do we know? who's
We
gonna-
have ambulance service, we still have ambulance service, and we'll continue to have ambulance service.
I just want to make that clear to the public so that they don't think that because nobody responded, we're out there, you know?
There were responses, and again, we're not complete, we're not done with that process, so
I know.
we just aren't ready to bring something to the board for action.
Yeah, your email made that clear, but the paper just said that nobody responded, so people get the idea that, oh, we don't have an ambulance anymore. Well, it could be
There is
scary.
ambulance service, so yeah.
Page 5, under listers, consulting professional services, we didn't have anything in the first iteration, but now it's gone up to 45,000. First iteration that we got, if you have it with you, was 0, but it's 45,000. Is that because of the dam situation? I'm guessing that's probably what it
That's
is.
part of that, and also we've been informed by the state that we're more than likely gonna have to do some additional work on a revaluation. So we probably will have to do some additional work as well.
You open to questions on other parts of the document?
Yeah, I'll go to my next one. Okay, number 7, I got page 7, under recycling expense. That just a readjustment on the wages and recycling. It was 98,000. Last iteration, it dropped back by grand. We fired somebody. I know they're shorthanded down there, but
Yeah, I think I did it assuming a full,
no problem. I just checking it just changes. I just-
yeah, I'll look at that in more detail. Why I lowered it
We
so
did
much.
lower it. There was a, right. We're not changing people though, it's just because of the mix. Costs.
So page 8. We go to the development assistant. This is, I don't know, this is a new item that wasn't down there before, so. We know what's going on there. Just, I know we chatted about it earlier with Gary, but I'm not sure.
A lot of that's been covered in covers the part-time hours, in a lot of cases, that's who've been working, we've been covering that with grants. Because we do get a lot of grants that have an administrative overhead percentage built in as part of the grant award. We'll continue to get those. All this does is give us some certainty that we can schedule hours and help support Gary. Outside of whatever we get from grants. Grants would just be a supplement to that and would give us additional help.
So this is going to be a new position.
Actually, Betsy's hours were being paid for out of the line item for
Right.
Scott's assistant,
Right.
because she was originally going to be doing some of both, but she's mostly doing development, so we're just putting her there.
So.
Right.
Is the executive assistant money been just back down there, or is that still sitting out there?
And then he's,
I know we've asked to get one going,
yes,
but.
so he
that's my-
also
That's my
has
next call question. We need
He,
to make
him.
progress.
He, him,
Yeah,
our
but
guy.
him.
Advertising for that.
So he also has money in that line item for his assistant.
Yes.
So there's 2 now.
I just want to make sure that our request was.
heard.
was done.
Acknowledged and included.
Checking on it. No. I want to get your stress level up.
No.
Take care of yourself.
Okay. Later on, I noticed that Vista is requesting an extra $2,500. This is in the economic development down there a
Yes.
little further. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think I'm not in favor of that. That's just my opinion.
What page is that on?
Page 8, it's just down below, same economic development. It's going to 75, they want to go up to 10,000 now. One of the reasons.
I didn't put that in there, but
No, but there's a request there, and Scott said he just didn't put it there.
Wanted to have the board talk
If they have a
about it, just
request there,
because
they
it's
would
a-
have to probably petition for the extra on the town, because that's a change.
but do they have, that's not a social service agency,
No,
so they wouldn't
so
have.
it wouldn't have
petition
to,
the
so
town
it's up to the board.
Right.
Correct.
board, yeah.
I don't know how the board feels.
Does anyone from Fifth want to speak to that?
Well, I'm on the agenda after this general fund. I would love to.
That's where it
see
came
that,
out.
So I'm not
Right.
sure, you want me to go now and then, or I can wait?
We can do it at the next, there's a couple items down.
Okay, and Gary needs to chime in on this too, obviously.
It really doesn't have more area. It's in his budget, but it's not directly.
Right, but it is an economic development function, right?
If you want to call it that.
Yeah.
My opinion is that it benefits the village more than it does the town, as much, although we are all one thing, so I don't know, maybe we should knock on the village door and see. that. I'm
It is
Just
village-
throwing that out there.
village
I know
falls,
Deb's listening, I'm waiting
downtown
for that
development.
hand to come up.
Yeah, no, you're right, Peter. It's Bellows Falls downtown.
Right,
development.
so I mean, it's a thought,
All right, good point.
so.
Clear.
They pull that on us all the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, so.
Sorry, Victor.
Okay, let's get down to employee benefits. There's some quite a few changes I noticed from the first iteration. FSA, I think that was due to an increase, planned increase that you may not have accounted for the last time. It was 36,300 the first iteration, now it's up to 53.
The which one?
The FSA,
Oh, the FICA?
it was 36,300 last iteration we got, and now it's up to 53, which I assume was just due to the increase.
That was because my original number, and I think last year's number, it might end up coming up short there.
So last year's was 31,000, but if you
Yeah.
look at the actual in 22 was 62,000, so 61,000.
So I was looking at my
Okay.
spreadsheet,
Yeah, I'm just,
and there was people missing from it,
I look at numbers all the time,
but there was people missing, and so
but the
this,
good side is the
This
next
should be
item down, it was 83.5 last iteration, now it's down to 68 for the health insurance.
that's because we got our real numbers of who wanted
Right,
what.
yeah. Insurance incentive went up, I guess, we just planning, there may be some extra people, I know it was 15.5 originally, 22 was the actual 15.5, and now it's gone up to 23.
Mhm, the
Yeah.
amount went up.
We had 16.3 in there last time.
Question, wasn't that part of the plans that the incentive would go down if we took on the platinum health insurance plan? Wasn't that one of the points that was made?
The,
Percentage was
the
supposed to.
percentage to pay went down, but the payment still went up because the platinum is so much more than the gold.
So the percentage of premium that is actually part of the incentive went down. But because of the cost of the premium, it actually created a slight increase on that area.
But if we had kept it at 50% instead of 40, the increase would have been even larger.
It would have been much more significant.
Right, so this-
Much larger increase.
This is when people whose spouse have health insurance and we pay, is that what this has to
We
do?
paid them not to take ours.
Now, HRA. It was 23,752 last iteration, now it's down to 65, which is good for us, but I don't know what happened with that.
So for every person that's on the insurance, a single person gets 1,000 and a couple or
Okay.
family gets
I
15.
remember the conversation
So,
at the meeting.
Based on how many people chose what plans, that's the number.
Okay, and we didn't know that going into it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, last item, employee appreciation, that same as flex fits. No,
No, we put that in as an option for the board to consider, because we don't do any kind of traditional, we don't have an employee picnic, we don't have any employee incentive, any employee recognition kind of programs or any of the basic So it's really just something for us to start looking at those things and trying to
Well, I
see.
know that we had an item in there that we were expending for Flex Fitness up the street here, and we never budgeted for it, and it came out the blue.
And that was one of the considerations, right? That was never a adopted item
Right.
in our personnel policy. And so if we do an employee wellness type of program, we would bring that back to the personnel policy and ultimately to the board for adoption.
So what would you do with this $1,000 if you had it?
We have talked about just some basic things like potentially giving people maybe tickets to come and see a show at the Opera House as a incentive, or family members, or having a picnic or some other kind of recognition. And we don't do any recognition in terms of longevity or other types of things, which we traditionally do. So it's just a basic starting point.
We should do a holiday get
No, we
together.
said-
We haven't
yeah,
done that
we
in
did.
years.
No, we haven't done
Right.
it. Well, I
Something
think
along
COVID
that
put a
line,
stop to
yes.
that for a couple of years.
$1,000 isn't gonna get you.
We haven't done that.
No, but
We just wanted to start
it's the start.
and build up.
All right, let's go to page 10. Unsafe building, we don't have any reserve in there, do we? Should we have something in case we get stuck with something, or we just kind of eat it when it comes or happens, or,
We have money in the unsafe building fund.
yeah.
We didn't
But
add
we
any
don't-
additional.
Right, we don't know what,
Oh, that's what I said, do we just
we do know Barker.
eat it when it comes, or? I mean, you never know when a
We've
fire's
already
gonna
allocated
happen.
money
so.
in this year's budget for that.
Oh, right, that's just
Because we're tearing down later this winter.
Anybody else, they got anything, holler, you know?
I wanted to bring up something on page 9. I'd like to consider $2,000 for the Bellows Falls Historical Society to help with maintenance of the riverfront park. Any hope with that? Under service agency?
That's a service entry, you'd have to petition that for the town.
So how do you go about that?
You gotta sign it, 30 signatures, I think, on the, said to support the
And then,
thing, and then it gets on the town meeting warning, and then gets voted at town meeting.
oh, okay,
Then it will get added if it passes, but deletes, well.
Is it a service agency though? What is it?
Petition from the town clerk.
Yeah, you can get them off the internet. too, doesn't make-
right. So I thought you said that this year it's all one bundle, so we don't do that, we just.
Right,
put it in the
but
budget.
because it's a new request, you have to do a
Okay,
petition.
But yeah, it may not be as
Yeah, what was it
qualified as
again?
service
What
agency.
was it? For
the
the,
Historical Society. Bellows Falls Historical Society.
Keep a deadline for getting a petition in.
It has to be before we get the warning adopted, that's for sure, and that's gonna be what,
17th.
January. Sometime January 17th, I think you said we have to have.
Could be before then.
Warning out of this. So it has to be there, I mean,
Okay, so what we should do then is get a petition and have it put on the
well,
warrant.
it may not, as Sue just said, it may not require a petition, just that it would need to be put on the town meeting warning to be, see if folks want to pay $2,000.
Well, let's erase it.
right,
Just
I
repeat
think,
it.
I think that maybe that could be added to another section.
Trying to find the fun.
But I don't know.
I love
what
these people,
section.
they bleeding heart. I'm not going there. This- One of the reasons why I think we need that committee to go through this. We're getting way out of hand. with this
Maybe.
whole Service situation here.
I don't, we could really use some help, and I think it's a big plus for the town to have it.
Well, the last time that you did anything like that, if you notice under recreation, you do have $2,000 a year that you give to Saxon's River for the recreation area. I'm assuming it's along the same basic
Yeah.
lines, but I don't know that.
Not exactly, because the town owns that rec center.
Thanks,
No,
Trevor owns it.
No, not
I mean,
Saxon.
Saxon's River.
We don't
owns
own
the
that.
rec center.
The village does.
Here, do you think that
Correct.
historical
We just-
would belong under economic development with the chamber and suburbs and
I
different?
do, yeah.
Oh,
because
really?
It's destination, And that
Okay.
area is a focus of the area-wide plan under the hill with
Right.
destination tourism as an objective. I think it's a perfect fit for that.
So is this the time to put it in there or wait till town meeting?
I mean, you can do two things. You can all vote to add it and say, yes, we want to, or you can put it on the warning and have the voters vote it, yes. You got a choice.
Well, I move that we add $2,000 to the development, economic development department to assist the Bellows Falls Historical Society in maintaining the lovely park that we own in Bellows Falls.
A second.
A question before can I ask a question? How does that square with the BFDDA budget also being part of development? Might we do the same things in that situation, Gary? What would,
I don't understand the question.
okay, so just a minute ago, we were talking about the Bellows Falls downtown development, how we might support their work. And since they are an economic development driver, the same kind of a thing where we're making information for you.
So, BIF is in the economic development department, that item already.
But he's trying to hook
He's trying
her
to fund
request
it.
into, and you just explained that a while ago,
Oh,
about being it into the same situation of community
the only
enhancement or
The only
whatever.
problem with bundling them is they have different missions, objectives. There's different organizations operating them. BIFTA is tied to Agency of Commerce and Community Development's designated downtown program, which has very specific guidelines and has that organization as a requirement. So like when we get tax credits for a historic building downtown, like Rockingham Roasters, was able to secure a lot of those to redevelop that building because we have it. So I think it would be wrong to mix them together.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's two different, because BIFTA is really focused on the economic development of downtown Bellows Falls. Whereas the park, even though it's located in Bellows Falls and owned by the Bellows Falls Historical Society, is a magnet for the area overall. I don't know, that's just one argument there.
Well, I think we should put this on the article for our meeting.
You think we should vote on it instead?
Okay. If that's your wish, then we can. It's not, it
So it's
doesn't need a motion.
$2,000 for one. I mean, I would say it would make more sense. I mean, that's probably not the only area in the village and in the town that needs some extra help. Maybe it's putting in a little bit more money and then entities can apply for the funding somehow, or, I mean, it just seems like, I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, putting in 2,000 as opposed, I mean, to put it on the town meeting for people to vote for just $2,000, just, I don't know, it just seems,
Before, you know.
Bonnie,
I know.
One time or all the time?
they want it all the time.
I'm
They
thinking all the
continue.
time.
No, once it's voted, it would be in there.
Do you think that it would take $2,000 every year? I guess I don't know what.
It takes about that. There's mowing, weed whacking.
I can tell you, based on our contract for cemeteries, it'd be a lot more than $2,000. Mowing and weed whacking.
Yeah, it is. It's more than that. I mean,
Yeah.
but we've been trying to,
Quite a bit more, I think.
You're just asking
Yeah.
for support.
It is
We're asking for some
right.
support.
It's not a complete offset. It's not a.
no, it's not at all.
They use a lot of, I'm on that board also, and they do use a lot of volunteers. But it is, it is something that has to be done because it'll just get totally covered with weeds if it's not taken care of.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people, working their tails off down there. But, you still need a riding mower and you need a crew to come through there every couple of weeks in the warm weather and to clean up the trees, branches fall. So would you propose something like a line somewhere for just beautification?
Yeah,
Put 5,000 in there and let people come.
then I would put it on the town warning that way. as something broader than just money to you. I mean, because there's others, you know,
There's the
there's the
waypoints.
garden point, there's a wait, I mean, well, we're supposed to take care of that, but, I mean, who's doing the monument at Red Light Hill? Who does that? Garden Club? Send it-
Yes, garden club.
That's kind of an issue, I think. because-
Yeah, because there's
We
other
lost our
things, so
primary
it should be,
caretaker.
if you make it bigger, then it could be something that groups could apply. I mean, it's adding staff time, obviously, to do that, but it could be a pool of money that's available to, for these other organizations, because then they could potentially get matching grants or matching donations, saying we can get $500 from the town, if you can give us $500, we can do that. I don't know, I mean, that's just an option as opposed to just, because then we're gonna have, like, social services, we're gonna have all these other beautification people coming to us.
Exactly,
We'll
you're
put
right.
200, some for us, some for that, as opposed to having a fund that people can apply for.
And could that fund be managed by the town? Could Scott make the call on that?
Certainly apply, I would make the
Good.
board aware. I wouldn't
No,
necessarily
I have
ask you.
seen it, I think, I can't remember the town, but I know that one town, they established a fund, like, I think
separate fund.
$50,000.
Yeah.
And that's all you get. First come, first served. When money runs out, they don't take any more takers. That's it.
I don't know about that.
It
that
sounds like
kind
the
of
Hunger
system.
Games.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, I can remember when the services was at $120,000. On here, we ended up cutting it back when we put that committee on, but that went down to 70,000. And I was inching back up to the $120,000, like, which is cents on that. Well, you know,
Yeah, I don't like that first come, first served bit. I
Well,
think
that's-
somebody has to.
that's
sort of-
one way to.
Well, we could say there's 5,000 and this is just for beautification. Applications are due by April 1st. And then we have, in April 1st, the select board meets and it's all out the money. Is that a way to approach it?
We could do that way. I mean, we'd want to, I mean, if you did it, you'd want to have organizations who come with matching funds, which is, that they're not relying on that fund just for,
Because that's exactly what's gonna happen.
yeah.
You set out money out there and you're just gonna. just like
It would
that.
have to be matched in my.
They will, they'll take it, you know.
Well,
So that's maybe one way to, without, I mean, it sounds like without doing that, it's just gonna be a hassle for town hall staff, you know?
Yeah.
And it needs to come, I think, before the board.
Well, hopefully, if you're giving money, you guys feel good about it, right? I'm
Yeah.
hoping that it becomes a positive thing.
Yeah.
right, That we're contributing to have really good projects that make everybody feel good.
No, I mean, because the
Yeah.
town is looking beautiful right now from volunteer groups
No,
and
it's been a lot
the
of
park
work.
is great. So I mean, I think it's something the town should support, but I think it has to be a system that it's fair to other entities to come and apply.
Yeah,
for.
I hear what you're saying, because a friend of mine's gonna take over the little fountain thing at Red Light Hill. And she was told, you gotta buy it all, you know, there's no money, you just do it, you know?
Yeah.
So it would be good, I mean, I know they have the beautiful flowers on the bridge in Saxon's River. It would be good to match people's efforts with something from the town to keep these things up.
would the village be willing to split the cost with us?
If you run out of the flagpole.
No,
As Bonnie said.
I mean,
Not likely.
We can only ask.
well, could we put it out there as a proposed split?
Well, no, because then Saxon's River would be getting some, they wouldn't like that.
I don't know, Kara Flores takes care of those flowers on the bridge on Sax River. and I don't know if they pay them or would they do it voluntarily. I
I have
don't
no
know.
idea. I'm just remarking that that's.
A lot of the work is focused on Bellows Falls, and theoretically, the village would want to chip in for that, yes?
That would be the line of thinking, but that doesn't mean that's all the way they're gonna think.
Well, I mean,
You know, you only ask.
there's
Alright.
always a fuss if Saxon's River gets anything. You know, if the village puts in money into a pot and then Saxon's River gets some, they don't like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could contribute if they want, and then it becomes a joint board that does the decision. Or a tri-board, that gets very complicated, but I mean, I think maybe we just put out, find a number we're comfortable with and put it as a separate warning. on the agenda to see if it's something that the
Yeah,
taxpayers
we
are willing
probably
to.
got a word that the applicants will be required to
Yes,
have matching funds. They ask for 1,000, they better cough up $1,000 soon. Otherwise, you said,
Right.
people just gonna come up and say, oh, there's free money, let's go get it.
That's a very good
So,
thought.
Yeah, that's good. Otherwise you could say, oh, I got an idea.
yeah.
Give me $500. I'm gonna do X, Y,
Just
Z.
to have some skin in the game.
Yeah, there is.
You got it.
definitely has to be matched.
And Scott, you think it'd be too much work if we ask you to, I mean, I can imagine us having these meetings and thinking like, who's doing the flowers?
We're gonna make it a very simple online application and a very simple process. Yeah.
Okay, this way also, you'll have an executive assistant to help them take care of that.
That's right. One more job.
We're not gonna let that get off.
All right, so we do
I'm
we need to
gonna have
make,
to blame a drink or two before we get done.
do we need to make a motion to add this to our budget or what?
Well, before we do that, can I talk to you a little bit about contracted services? Because we have talked multiple meetings
What
about,
page you on, Scott?
I'm on page 9, the top of
Okay.
page 9. So we talked about options for police coverages out of the town.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
So we did not add a line item here because I did want also, there's lots of ways to do this. Obviously, you could bring the sheriff back if you want to talk to them specifically about a specific contract for a certain amount of hours. And you add that then as a contract service. And it'll be a conversation about even putting that out as an article. We do National Highway Transportation, the governor's National Transportation Safety Initiative, so there is a grant that comes out. And I'm working with the BF police chief to try to build up our staff to where we can do targeted enforcement in the village at least once a month. And the concept would be, we would try to potentially, if the village would agree, that we could also potentially do targeted enforcement once a month out in the town as well, using village forces under that basic concept. That's, if you do that once a month, 2 officers, 4 hours of an officer, it's about $5,200 for that. And that would be a once a month, 4-hour enforcement, very specific for speed enforcement. It would not do any of the other enforcement that we talked about. That would still be the responsibility of the sheriff and the BSP, things like complaints about people that were potentially dealing drugs or ATVs or chasing whatever, those types of things, still not be part of that. It's been very specific to speed enforcement.
Of course, unless they saw that happen in front of
Obviously,
their
right.
eyes, then they would take care of it because they're.
Definitely, because they're sworn to uphold the law, but would not be, so that's another option. Again, I'd have to talk to the village, but it was another potential problem.
When we've raised it before, when this has come up, they have never been supportive of that. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't be.
Right.
Every board's different.
The goal there would be to try to do 2 targeted enforcements per month, with very
Right.
specific.
If you get the funding, that's not gonna hurt their pocketbook, and they might be.
Correct.
willing to-
But it would be a contract, and it would have to be
Just think
something that's
outside the
agreed
box.
upon, yeah.
I think that's a neat
Move it
idea
around.
to pursue.
So, but again, there's no line item in there, so if you wanted to add a line item, much like we talked about with the maintenance, that would be something, that would be a location we have to add money to.
Or as a, as you said, as a.
We're gonna have a discussion at the,
A town hall, a town meeting.
Correct.
I think maybe have discussion at town meeting, because if residents really want it, they'll show up to town meeting and fight for it. Sure, you would hope, as opposed to just putting it in the budget.
We have to have something specific from the sheriff for people to talk about. People come to town meeting and say, I want, Cambridgeport wants somebody, Rockingham wants somebody. We have a proposal, and the sheriff didn't show last time, remember, he sent
No.
a subaltern.
Well, we could come up with a proposal. This is what it's gonna cost us. This is what we put on between now and the 17th. We'll have those numbers and we can have the sheriff come in and tell us.
Okay.
you'd have to come on the 3rd in order
Yeah.
to nail that down, so. But those are, again, it's.
It wouldn't hurt to have them come in here and find out, number one, if he's gonna be able to have the personnel to
Yeah.
cover it. Because everybody else is complaining that they're not getting their coverage, what they're paying for, so Westminster's one, Saxon is the other.
Yep.
So, if they can't cut it, then, you back up to 20.
Well, you have to very specifically say, I could do this, and I would be
Right.
able to support it, what have you.
So
Yeah,
some-
'cause it could just be a number in the warning. And we may not know, okay, whether it's gonna be something we work out with the BFPD or or?
Sheriff is more
Sheriff's.
comprehensive, right? But again,
Yeah.
the basic complaints that we seem to get from the people that have contracts is they never have any indication as to when they were in town, what they did. There seems to be this idea that, they don't seem to get real follow-up, in terms of activity, so.
Westminster's not happy.
So would the warning have some wording to the effect of be continuing upon funding from that transportation funding or?
No, because that's not a guarantee. So if you're gonna do it, you'd have to have an identified source.
In
And
other
then you have
words,
to
we're
then
gonna,
go,
somebody's gonna have to cough up the money somewhere, so.
correct. It would have to be in our budget or approved by,
Because the village won't need that, that's for sure. There's no loss to pay for it, so.
Right. But it
No,
keeps,
I mean, it would be added to, could be almost a penny added to the passes, if it passes as the warning, as a warning.
5,000,
52? I think it said 5, I think it said 52.
5,200.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry, I
not
thought you said
52,000.
50,000.
No.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say that was a lot. for
No,
one.
5,200. That was
alright.
just a very minimal, de minimis,
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
You can go up from there, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think when we looked at the potential for part-time contract hours for the town, I think it was 12,000. I think was the number when we looked at,
12,000 for like 10 hours, I think.
yeah,
We figured about 16,000, I think, too, if we threw Saxon River into the mix.
right. I did not include that. I was just.
Right,
simply
so if
talking
we left
about
that out, that'd be somewhere down. less
So I
than that.
guess that's really where the board needs to sort of decide as to how you want to structure that, how you want to approach it, and do you want to do it as an article? Do you want to do it as an item as a contract serves in the budget? Still voted on at town.
If we did it as an article, someone at town meeting could make a motion to amend that to a different number, couldn't they?
Mhm.
So, yes.
Yeah.
They can amend the budget, they can take $200,000 or $500,000 out of it, too, so.
and then we got to coordinate with Sac River because they already have a contract with the
Right.
sheriff's department. They kept that going.
Yeah.
$8,700 they pay for 12 hours a month. 3 hours a week.
So
And according to Andy, their complaints is they're not getting any speeding enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, that's key things, is to get speeding enforcement, then you do get some of that money back in those tickets.
Yeah, and I don't think
Town-
based on the
town
way
will
he
get it
writes
up.
these contracts that, because he has to put special details out. for the
Yeah.
speeding, right? You have to put at least, 1 or 2 cars out, sometimes more, depending on where they are. So I don't think they do speed enforcement, it's just a routine matter of the contracts.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, we ready to move along here?
well, we
What's
answered
the
Scott's
decision
question.
on that, though?
yeah, I'm
Put it
not
in the
clear as
budget,
to
or-
how, it's not in there. Would you like us to add something as a placeholder so that you can see what the impact would be? And then decide if you want to take it forward
I
as
would,
a
yeah, I think I would put
contracted
in,
service?
no, I think I would put more. 5,200 is just
Minimal.
minimal. And I guarantee you that residents in Bartonville would not be happy with once a month. You said.
Right,
Yeah.
4 hours.
I
once
mean,
a
they
month.
want 6 hours a week, which is too much. I think you get 1 hour. a week.
And then you get other parts of town, the Cambridge
Yeah.
board says, hey, we want some coverage.
Well, no, they should get coverage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so I think you should figure out, what, say it's one office, 1 8-hour day. I mean, what are their days? 8 hours? Or,
I don't think he commits the contracts in that way with the part-time to hours. I think that's where it gets to become very difficult.
then you say 1 hour, you say you want 10 hours a week, whatever that is, which we figured out was 12 something, I think.
At their current rate, I
At their
think it was
current rate.
$62 an hour on the part-time rate, if I remember.
Yeah.
correctly.
$2, yeah.
Right.
So if
But
we-
then that 10 hours in my mind would be, you fold in Saxon River, so that's out of their,
Right, so they would stop funding their private contract with them.
what is theirs, 4 hours a month? Is it?
4 hours, 12 hours a month,
Well,
3 hours a week.
3 hours a week.
Why wouldn't we just keep them there?
Hmm.
Why wouldn't they just keep doing?
Well, you
what
could
they're
keep them
doing?
there, but then you're gonna get the complaints, why is Saxon River taxes paid for an extra police service that we're not seeing?
That's why I think needs to go on the town. It's a town meeting warning, you just say, covered for town, it's going to be cost X amount not to exceed
I think we
And
should
they
just
could
invite,
be the Bells Falls, I mean, the outskirts of Bells Falls, they could be in Cambridgeport, they could be in Saxon River, they
Right.
could be anywhere in all of Rockingham. It's not specific to one part of the town.
I think we should invite them to discuss very specific about the contract on the 3rd, and then the board can make a decision on that
Yeah.
night. how they
Okay.
wanna do
Yeah,
it.
that's good.
Okay.
So, and I'll ask the sheriff to come, because I really think it's important
Something
that.
good, yeah.
you
So
know,
we want to put a placeholder number in here for now.
I would say 10 hours a week if you put a placeholder in, just see what that is.
10
I'll
hours a
work
week.
with, we got an update after tonight anyway. I'll work with Alyssa. We'll get something in there just to see what it looks like.
Or it was 6 hours a week.
It wasn't
I can't
per week. It was, yeah, we had a number we had worked
Yeah,
out.
never, not
If we're gonna put it on the warning, though, we wouldn't put it in the budget, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to page 12. Top of the page reserves, I think what you did is, the fire equipment reserve was last iteration was 100,000. I think just put some money into the bridge reserve, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it there?
Yes,
Okay.
top of page 12.
Yeah, we didn't have any bridge reserve last time with zips, so they split that. So 50 would go to the fire reserve equipment and 50 would go to the bridge reserve.
In highway.
Okay,
And there's nothing in there for unsafe building reserve.
Not at the moment.
no, we don't have anything to say, so I guess we just gonna talk about maybe just, you never know when a fire's gonna happen, so, you know, when you're gonna. need
We
to
would
take
come and take
down,
something
so-
out of fund balance if we had a specific issue.
So we could, that's why I was asking Scott, we got some
Right.
playroom in there, so we do if we have to. I mean, the one on church place over there, when that went, we didn't even plan for that one, so. And that one had asbestos in it, so we had a problem there, that cost us a lot of money on that one. Almost $100,000, to take out that one. All right, the cinema expense there down the bottom, I think, you could make adjustment in the wages, which is cost of the FICA to go up also with that.
Right.
So. Page 13. You don't have anything for property tax at, the bottom line, that's why there's only 9,700 sitting out there for 23, or 24 rather. Because they don't know what the tax rate's gonna be, so to distribute any funds over there. If you look at that property tax line, it says 54,360, 22.
Right, there's
And
nothing
then
there.
23, we put 61,6 in there.
So if you go to. If you go to the page 14. I just forgot to carry it up, but it's 41,676. The difference between the revenue and the expenses, so that's what would get plugged into the
Oh, yeah. 41,660.
property tax revenue.
So that's what you think you're guessing that.
And every time you move numbers around.
Yeah, it's gonna change there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that, I just assumed that's. what it was
Just a
saying,
plug
was
in
the
at this
taxes.
point, yeah.
And while we're on that page, what about cemetery operations? Kind of don't have anything in there. In the current budget, we have 6,000 for outside services and equipment. And we have 0. For this year, same with building maintenance, repairs and maintenance. Miscellaneous surveying. So 0.
Yeah, I think I have notes there that none of that money has been spent this year.
Doesn't that cover for, you know, hate to use the word, but grave diggers and stuff, because they charge the person who's actually doing the burial, it gets charged through the funeral home. And that's why nothing gets charged to that item. And then do it, because you got money in there for, building and repairs, maintenance, et cetera.
So last year, we didn't spend any money in any of those line items. And then this year, we haven't spent any.
Yeah.
So 2 years, nothing spent from here. Could we ask to use, like, can we take that and save it into a fund? for using, so it's not just.
In the general fund. Yeah.
Right.
So it's not just wasted. So it actually gets saved for what it was intended to for a later date. So if something was to come up next year for outside services equipment, we have money in the fund to just move it and pay
If
for
we
it.
wanted to re-gravel some of the roads, I mean, some of the things we talked about is more heavy maintenance as opposed to routine maintenance.
And that's why the tax thing, that's why the taxes went down $20,000. Because I didn't plug anything in there yet. But that's $20,000 that we didn't actually spend, that we budgeted 2 years in a row.
Well, part of that's because it seems like we just never do anything with our cemeteries. I don't know.
Yeah. Other than mow them occasionally, yeah.
Well,
I think it would be good to have a
Really
reserve
hard.
fund for the cemetery. Beyond the day-to-day maintenance.
To me, if it's something that's just gonna be done sporadically as things are, then it doesn't make sense to try to budget for it, because you don't know.
Or, I mean, then it would be money for, say, a matching grant, and I know we're talking about doing work at the meeting house cemetery up there, that might take some funds.
I mean, I think we
Had
need
that
to
money
figure
in
out-
reserve, it could be a matching to a grant that might be needed.
I think that we need to have some money somewhere, because if we're starting a cemetery committee specifically tasked with looking at cemetery maintenance, and then we give them no budget.
Yeah.
Figure out some way.
So before the
Make
end of
something
this
available.
fiscal year, I'd probably come back and say, can we move this 13,000 unspent money to something
We could just do
to
that.
save it for?
We can transfer from.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And whose graves do we open?
We don't.
It says
Yours.
opening graves, $600, 15, whatever, it's doubling here. if you look, I guess. What is that about? I see that it's a 115052140. Charges for services.
That's when they dig the hole, isn't it?
Yeah.
Opening, right?
Okay, so
Isn't that what
we,
that means, opening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so we pay for that, or we bill for that?
It's built to the,
It's usually billed through whoever's funerals
Right.
is paying for the funeral. Usually, I know that if you ever go down and have you go through a funeral thing, it's written right on the
They pay
form. You
us.
pay for it at the point with the funeral director.
Okay.
The only thing I could think of is maybe indigent that don't have any money,
Okay.
and we may be able to draw out of that.
probably, it's
Well, this
probably
is money that
another,
we get receive for doing it.
Something like that.
It's a charge for service.
This is
right?
money that we
Like,
receive.
we receive for doing it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we bill
So we
to
bill for it.
dig the hole.
Okay, thanks.
Prepare the site.
Oh, sorry, to
Right.
prepare the site.
Well, I would try that.
Dig the hole. Was that on TV?
we can also go to green burials, and then we can have a good income.
There you
line.
go.
So,
Page 14. Scott, you talked to me a little bit about that down the bottom of the page, miscellaneous income, solar lease contract, you're trying to do something maybe.
Right.
for a pit, to do with a pit or something, do some of that money.
We are on target to see that revenue come in. And I have included just some general information on some of the reclamation portion that we have to start working on with the pit. So we were hoping that we could use some of that revenue as well as probably some additional revenue. We'll have to go out and do some gravel removal. But that would then get us to start doing some crushing, stockpiling some of the loam and some of the other materials, so we can start working on the closure piece, because I think we're into that third year of the 5-year plan for that closure. So
and then
that's really what that was going to be targeted for.
we had some a reserve fund of some kind for.
We had
closing
reserved
of the
at
pit.
40,000
What's that?
before, but I think if you look on page 18, it's got gravel for operation, I assume that's where he's.
Yeah, but years past, I mean, for many years, we were putting money in our budget for closing the pit, so that
Right.
must be somewhere in some
Yeah,
kind of fund. What is it stand at now?
There,
It's under reserves, I think.
I know the answer to that.
I don't
It's
know how
probably
much is in
highway.
there from that's approved.
The gravel bit closure is 0 on page 18.
That's just for current year expenses.
Right.
So I'm gonna go to the fund. Hold on.
Yeah, we've been putting in money, I can't remember how much for many years for that.
Maybe in the general fund, you think?
It's in the highway, it's
in
a
the,
special fund.
I think
under
it's in the
highway.
capital fund.
Look under reserves,
99,000.
99,000.
page 12.
I thought there was,
That's the Route 103, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, there's 99,000 in there. That's why we didn't put any more in.
yeah, right. 'Cause I know Everett told me that we had enough for what needs to be done for the closing to meet the active requirements. in the fund.
So Scott, does that
Not for
mean,
the
But that
gravel
doesn't mean-
portion, right, not to extract, to do any extraction.
No, not for extract,
That's
but
just to
just
crush
the
some
the
stone,
closing
do
out when it's
some-
all done.
Screening of the loam to get somebody in there with and start working some of the material. So that's one piece. The second piece is to do gravel work. So once the new poles are in and the new solar arrays are up, it's gonna make it difficult to do any more extraction in that one area. Right now, Bucky Adams is doing some of the work. We want to dig some test pits and see just what kind of material might still be there. Peter Higgins and some people, old timers tell you it's crap, it's no good. We haven't had any recent information to be able to find out exactly what it is, so we want to do some test pits and then before we came back to the board with any kind of proposals to do gravel operation, we present to you guys what we found, so. We obviously don't want to do gravel work if it's not going to be good material. So there's no reason to do that.
Then page 15, what is this transfer in water, transfer in sewer?
Wait,
Does that pay for the water and sewer?
wait, we're doing highway now?
Yeah.
Go to your new paper. Is this- oh, this is what's wrong.
We have Andy here, we are, I guess on just general highway, the big things are the highway equipment, which are the big number for replacement of equipment. Trying to find the pages of that one. I lost track of these. Is equipment, is highway equipment. budget. Highway equipment budget.
Oh, it's on page 4. The capital outlay.
Yeah, on the capital.
That's for. That's for a new excavator and a smaller.
Yes,
Oh, it's on page 3 for the transfers to equipment fund, 320,000.
so it's really on the last page on the page.
And that goes into the capital so that we can buy the.
Right.
You were asking about transfer water, transfer sewer, right?
That was something, there's nothing in that, but that was a few years ago. The only reason you're saying this is because you have my copy, because the copy I gave you was messed up. There hasn't been any, for some reason, they did some work or something. I don't know. That was years ago,
It was for the Blake Street garage, right?
maybe.
I think we were paying the town for water sewer or something up there. That's what that was for.
at what point can we get rid of some of those old line items?
I inactivate them, but when I make this, it
With
gives
the
me
zero, it
everything.
shows up.
It gives me everything, even if it's inactivated.
So I just wanted, since we're talking about the equipment, I wanted, we did include the spreadsheet so you could see where we are in terms of the equipment replacement schedule. So the 320 reflects the loader and then the roadside mower. Those two big pieces for proposed for next year. And then 25 has the biggest issue there would be the grader, which is fairly expensive. And then another plow truck, but that's for 25.
And I got those switched on this.
The amounts are switched,
The
right.
excavator and the mower, that's the amounts are switched.
Right, but it's still 320. So,
Where are we gonna stand with highway reserve now that the FEMA is in there? Is all the FEMA in?
no, not all of them is in the got.
It's accounted for, but it's not technically in.
Only because, I mean, what we've been trying to avoid over years' time is sort of this up and down, up and down, up and down of equipment and keeping sort of enough money there to keep us, so it doesn't give these big hits on the.
Right,
So if there's any money remaining in our fund balance, that can be put into an equipment reserve fund of something to avoid having to come back and hit taxpayers for. And so that we can build that up so that there's money in there when, because sometimes it's not as expensive depending on what equipment you're replacing, but we don't want to keep having to up it.
right.
Up the
Right,
taxes.
it seems like we depleted what was in there and never did put in enough to keep it growing.
Yeah.
And then every year we deplete it and then that
Yeah,
causes
and we've
this
been trying
problem.
to avoid that, but because there is quite a few expensive items coming up in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it happens with the way equipment is, but
Yeah.
um,
Stays down or needs to be replaced.
yeah, so I mean, if there's some way to reduce the impact on the taxpayers by using fund balance and putting it in, building up that equipment fund.
Yeah, we have to think about that for next year, because it's gonna be a fairly, 550 is a fairly heavy hit.
Well, that, and then there's there's
Fire trucks.
fire trucks, and there was something else that another up on our debt schedule, something's being paid out next year.
By our next meeting, we'll have the final audit to discuss and we'll know exactly what the fund balance looks like. Right now, we could do that. We could take a whole bunch of money and put it over there.
I think the other key assumption is too, on our pavement, so I did incorporate the $820,000 request for pavement, which is in the budget as well. And then the list of streets that would cover, we did remove Darby Hill to get to the 820. It was significantly more than that if we included Darby Hill in the most recent round. So a lot of these are focusing more in the village per se than they are out in town. And if you remember in past years, the idea was at some point we were going to be borrowing up to $1.5 million to do additional paving that would offset some of the higher cost years. And I think we're trying to avoid that until we know for sure what our bridge project support payments are. So I think as we get a couple more meetings with VHB and get closer to final bid documents, we're gonna see what our impacts are with starting construction in 25, and then the real bridge construction 26 and 27. So that'll start fitting, slotting in, what our local share will be, so that we can then hopefully plot those years out for you as well.
Scott, the implications of the study we're doing on fire departments, that will have implications on equipment purchases, possibly?
It certainly could. Right now, the schedule assumes you're replacing everything that's currently in your inventory at some point past its useful life. And one of the items that we recommended in this budget is to buy a chassis for replacement for Rockingham. And it takes up to a year to get the chassis. And then Kevin's been working with a company that does the retrofitting. So they take all the stuff they can off the existing truck and put it back on the new chassis. And then that money will have to then be found once we get the chassis in and actually get the full cost as to what it's going to be. They come out and look at the equipment, give you a number, and you have to program that in. That's currently not in our fire equipment replacement. Only the purchase of the chassis, just so we can start that 1 year clock going. still paying down some previous fire equipment bonds. So we're still trying to stretch that out if we can and not add additional bonding. You look at your capital schedule and you look at this budget, you'll see that our overall bond debt payments are declining. So we are at least moving in a reasonable direction with that. So a few things, as Peter had said, and I think Rick had also said that we're going to sort of hit 24, 25, you start to see some stuff dropping off. And then we'll certainly have to add something with our bridge portions in 26 and 27. as we go forward.
Interest rates have gone up pretty dramatically though. That
Not
will-
helping our bond and debt now,
No,
not our projections. And that's going to be part of the conversations that the board's going to have when we get into the fire equipment replacement and, you know, significant capital expenses going forward, because it's going to be more expensive.
Right.
So,
And this is just ignorance on my part, but do the departments share equipment? Is there any time when fire and the Rockingham department is covered, and the Sax River department needs equipment from Rockingham, they share, or just, how does that work?
well, in a formal way, that's mutual aid, but in a operational sense, not much is shared because they all have a specific responsibility and specific responses. The question that the study should hopefully help us answer is what's the correct mix? Based on our population, based on our calls, based on our area of service, what would be a recommended mix of equipment?
Oh, good, okay. That'd be helpful.
And again, the board then has decisions to make because, you know, every piece of apparatus has a fairly high cost. So.
Okay, we all set? Let's go to an item that's not specifically motioned on the, mentioned on the, but it's the bid tech. What is it? And that's when everybody's read it.
Wait, can I just ask one other question while we have Andy here? Status of sidewalks, we haven't looked at our sidewalk plan in a while. Is there a sidewalk work that needs to be budgeted? I know. But I mean, we kind of like,
Yeah, years ago, we were, you know, we had a pretty good plan years
Yeah.
ago, and we kind of veered away from that, yeah.
However,
I mean, it's all how much you guys want to put in there. you know.
right, yeah, well,
It's like
there wasn't
paving,
much
I
in
mean,
there, if I remember
For years,
right.
we didn't do any paving, and now we're starting to get, you know, now that we're so far behind, we're having to put all kinds of money in for paving.
Exactly, which is why we don't want to divert from these plans that were developed.
Exactly.
They were developed for a reason.
Didn't we talk about how that money from this year's sidewalk and then the money that we put in budgeted for next year, that we were gonna ask if we could move that into a fund? Because we didn't use it this year.
Correct. Because there's only, was it 35,000 in there for sidewalks between Saxon, for, you know, Saxon River paving, and then for contract services, only 35,000. We haven't used it, so I suggest we carry it over till next year, and then we can have
70,000.
a lot more than, you know, just, if you're not gonna get a lot done for 35,000, but if you got 70,000, you can get a lot more done. So that's why I talked about just carrying that money over to next year, and then we can get a lot more done with 70,000 versus 35,000.
Right.
According to statute, it has to be done that way. It can't, it's gonna be carried over. If you've got X amount of money allocated to a sidewalk in Sac River, that money, you can't steal it from there and put it over here.
It's not
gotta be
allocated to a
carried
specific,
forward. So in other words, the
it's a
following year-
contract service, so if we
Right.
don't allocate it
Yeah.
to a reserve, it just drops to the general fund.
Right.
Or to
So
the
if we
fund balance,
allocate
rather.
this money from this year that we didn't use
Correct,
to a reserve fund for sidewalks, the next year, we can put it with the money we're budgeting.
Right.
And then pull it from that reserve and use it.
I think if you read the statute, if it's allocated to a certain line, I'm gonna stay in that same line. Look, you got 15,000 Saxon River.
Yep.
This year you didn't spend it, then it's gotta be carried over. You put another 15 in this year, then next year they'll have 30.
But that's the point of the reserve. That's how you carry it over. You can't carry it over just in the regular budget. It just doesn't work that way. The system just drops it off. And it ends up in the fund balance.
right. You
And
could
that's what I-
reallocate it back to Saxon River if that's what you wanted to do.
You can take it from the fund balance and put it in
Right.
next year's budget as a use of fund balance for that.
For a second.
Or you
Correct.
could put it in a Saxon River sidewalk reserve, and then when you actually spend it, you spend it from that. Because it's still a Saxon River reserve.
Okay, you all set
Yes,
or no?
I know, now I'm set. It's just that I forgot
So
about
let's
that.
go back to the Vista article here. We read it and then at the very end, they're asking for additional funding and it's under Gary's budget, so. It's not in the line items for Vista currently. That was put in the responsibility before it died.
Well, I'm going to abstain from commenting on it because I'm on the board.
Yeah, I
so-
know she names in the write-up.
So, no, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, no, it's all right, that's understandable.
Did Pat want to say anything?
Well, we've been level funded for many, many years. And right now, we can barely afford to pay Betsy for 15 hours a week. We do have some other expenses. We get free rent from the bank, but we have to pay for our internet and other, printing and other costs. And the Shop Local program is kind of self-funding, but we have a little bit allocated towards overhead, but it doesn't bring in a lot of extra cash. Most of that money is used for the Shop Local program. that we're doing. So, and then when we get money for, like for planting, that money goes towards the planting. So we're not really getting any extra funding. And, and I know in prior, when we had Mary Helen, gave her a raise, but we really didn't have the money to pay for it, so it was kind of awkward. I think, we don't want somebody to go without being paid a couple of months out of the year because we don't have any funds. But it's that funding, at least 10 or 15 years old, maybe longer than that. And since it's,
So inflation take a big chunk out of it.
yeah, and yet, well, we get half the money from the village and half the money from the town. But with the Shop Local program, we're actually including Rockingham and Saxon River businesses. We've also included Grafton and Westminster, but the idea was that we're one big shopping district. And so we're trying to encourage people to come and shop in our area and not be going down to Brattleboro and shopping online. It's all mostly volunteers that are doing the work, but we need to be able to pay our administrators.
So those other towns you service or do they contribute anything?
Oh, it's only individual businesses. It's not the towns themselves.
So I guess you said, are you asking for additional funding from the village?
The village and the town, yes.
But yes, and you're asking for funding.
Because most of our things that we do are, Rockingham, Saxons River, Bellows Falls. We do include our own Rockingham people more often than we include some of these other guys.
So I guess the question is, are you asking for funding also from the village and from Saxon River too?
No, well, the village, yes.
But not Saxon River?
They don't have much of a budget.
Well, I know, I've just asked her the question. I know they don't, I've been to their meetings.
Gary wants to say something.
Yeah, so there's something like 22 designated downtowns in Vermont, and they're all funded by different means. There's some legislation that allows them to be funded through development review districts or downtown development districts or options taxes. And they're often related to the size of the community, and it's an integral piece of the economic development of the downtown. There's boundaries to it that are in the designated downtown. So the Island District is part of it. Under the Hill, as far as Adams, Gristmill, and Wyman Flint are part of it. It goes, there's the square, of course, and then to the north, it goes as far as William Street, and to the south, it goes as far as Hadley Street, and, I'm sorry, Hapgood Street. And So there's a number of functions that BIFTA does that's really important and that I'd like to say are reasons for increasing the funding. In addition to, I mean, really good point that it's, for about a decade, it's been the same amount of money and costs have really gone up. But in terms of what we're looking to do in the downtown, BIFTA's roles include recruiting businesses to the downtown, helping to ensure that we don't have that gap tooth look where there's empty storefronts, helping to get enough shoppers to the storefront so that they can stay in business and they want to stay here. And even when in the best of times, or we have one of the few downtowns that has remained pretty full in terms of the storefronts through some of the since 1999 when this started, and we had a lot of empty storefronts in Cap-Tooth, and the challenge population has gone down, as we all know, in the foot traffic that can support these stores. A lot of them are on the edge, and so one of the goals of the area-wide plan is to mirror the square on the island so that we have commercial storefronts on the first floor and then residential units above them that provide shoppers more foot traffic to shop there. And it's going to be a lot more work for BIFTA. I mean, these increases won't take place till next July 1st. And it'll be further out when the development is completed, but we'll be starting the first ones coming next year, and BIFTA has a crucial role in filling those commercial storefronts. And in the end game, while it might be a little painful at first, is that there'll be a lot higher, the taxes will be spread a lot amongst a lot more properties in the end game. So at any rate, short answer is Economic Development Department supports the increase in BIFTA, and they certainly will be earning the small increase that we're putting out there.
So, yeah, I would like to move to support the increase. I think BIFTA leverages the work of your office, Gary. I think it's a multiplier effect. And also the volunteer people that give all their time to BIFTA. So it strikes me as a good investment. So I'm gonna.
I'll second that. So your budget now is only like 15,000, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And that includes your
Maybe
salary and taxes and us.
Oh, I know, it's ludicrous.
Survive.
It's really ludicrous.
It's kind of bad.
So I don't, if you read that, the fact that our grants that we received the last 3 years kind of doubled our capacity, and that's why we have this beautiful downtown. I don't know, people compare it to Burlington and Keene. I keep hearing people on the street just saying thank you and just how beautiful it is. And I mean,
I've heard a lot.
Well, and as a merchant downtown, I know that I'm getting customers from Brattleboro and Keene that are coming in, very happy to shop, and people that came in for the Parade of Lights that in the town had, and all the different projects that we're in. So we're trying to make this an exciting place to be part of.
So if you get this and you get the equal amount from the village, then your budget will be doubled, basically.
It's an extra 5,000
total.
I thought, how much?
They're at 7,500
7,500
now.
from
I mean,
each,
7,500 now.
They
We'd
would
be
be
adding
going to town.
2,500, so it'd be 10,000 from the town, 10,000 from the village.
Oh,
If they get to 25.
If
So
they
we're
get
definitely increase.
Yes.
okay.
And I'll just mention in 2024, we do, we have to renew our designation. And we're on an 8-year cycle. And I know Springfield just went through it. They were one of the first ones designated as a downtown. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of time and effort. So this will definitely help.
Okay, this is not on the agenda for action, so it would be a consensus item.
Oh, consensus.
No motion is required, so if the board is in agreement, then we just instruct them that the finance office to add $2,500 to the.
Okay, thank you for that. So we get that consensus?
Is there a consensus of the board to add $2,500 to the, but the. So be it. You want to add that? For the next- Okay, let's move down to the fun part, capital budget major projects. The first one was train station. Scott, there's some other information.
You guys want to hit Andy with anything else? Well, he's, or we can let him go because he hasn't had much sleep in the
No,
last.
yeah.
He looks wide awake.
Yeah, for the moment.
So there's other items in here, there's, you know, the budget items and stuff, we ran out some things, I don't know if you want to go into them before we get into the, or they don't. You got equipment replacement, and some debt stuff here.
The schedules you guys have seen before, I just threw them on there just as items, just so we could see them specifically in case you have questions. They are incorporated in the budget as it's currently seen, so we've highlighted most of those.
And there is a list of paving.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing this year, so everybody got that. All right, let's go to the train station, I guess.
So number
Sorry,
for
one,
Andy.
one question. Kate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just as a citizen meeting, this Action Hollow Road was talked about, but it didn't make it this year.
No, it didn't. No, we're doing everything in Bells Falls.
Yep.
This year, and I actually, if anyone ever wants to see it, of course, we're talking about redoing it as the RSMS, which is the plan for over the next 10 years of paving and, you know, and redoing roads. If anyone ever wants to see it, they can, you know, manager's got a copy of it, I have a copy of it, so.
It started in 2017 and it needs to be updated. So
Yes.
we have, we're gonna spend the money. It's about $9,800 to update it.
Yep.
So they'll go out, they'll update with all the work that's been done and programmed, as well as then give us a forecast with updated costs to go forward so that the board can see how we're doing with the progress on our.
And when we do Atchison Hollow, I'd like to do, you know, that area at the same time, like Mandigo Road needs it. The beginning of Cambridgeport Road and Atchison Hollow at the same time. So it make, you know, that way we're in that area, so.
That'll be a couple of years down the road.
Probably, I haven't looked at it, but yeah, I think it might be 2 years down the road.
That was the way it was kind of all blocked out, was this sort of takes by geographic area.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
you're
get
not
better
skipping
bid
around.
pricing if you're not jumping around.
This year, if you look at the paving, this year it's pretty much like this. Everything south of Oak Street. And then next year, we're gonna do north of Oak Street here in Belleville, you know.
Right.
Working on it, then next year we'll start working on the north end of town.
And just a question, there's no major sewer projects happening that are gonna interfere with any of that?
We're sharing it with Rob and with Brian to make sure that there isn't anything. The only thing that might impact us, and there's nothing we can do about it, is the water department is required to do a lead line service inventory to report to the federal government by 2024. So we're going to be going out and doing that. And at some point, I don't know what the requirement is going to be for remediation. So there might have to be some digging, but we just don't know until we submit our inventory. So.
Just kind of mention too, not that we're gonna do it this year, but we do have the issue with Rockingham Street with the chip sealing that has failed. So it's not gonna be something that's within our schedule for a while. I don't know what we want to do with that in future years. We want to just let it go, or
I recommend letting it go because it's just like a rubber coating on top that's coming off. The road's not failing or nothing. It's just a rubber coating that's coming off of it. You know, when we do snow removal, the grader, you know, the ground, the down pressure from the grader just rips it off.
yeah.
So I would recommend waiting a while, and then when the road needs to be redone, we just go through and we can mill it down and then repave it. So, I mean, yeah, it looks like crap for a while, but you know.
You notice that there's some splotches on Atkinson Street, I just went to walk across the street the other
Yeah,
day.
that's another thing too.
Down near
is
the village, there's some
That's-
big holes dug right out.
Atkinson Street, that project the state did, what, 5-6 years ago? Atkinson, Rockingham, and Westminster Street, that road's already failing.
Yeah.
And
I
so
assume you-
those were roads that were just paved 5-6 years ago that we're gonna have to address in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, Parker Hills, you know, holding up good. Luckily, leave 121 out through Cambridgeport, but those are ones we're gonna have to, start looking at here in the, the next 20 years as well. And we got 45 miles of blacktop roads. And in the last 3 years, we've paved, what, maybe 12, 14 miles of it in the last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, we got a lot of roads. I don't know if anyone has ever been up to Lower Meadows or Upper Meadows Road off of Route 5.
Yeah.
Come ride in a dump truck sometime with us.
That's a view.
Yeah,
It's-
it's nasty.
Just go to Springfield beyond Brockway Mills. I would say.
Exactly, and that's what
That's a great
it
one.
looks like, yeah. So, I mean, we're gaining, but we have to stick with the plan.
Right.
Stick with the plan, yeah, put the money in there.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
I kind
Just
of-
want to ask a question. Is there any sidewalk work that has to be done on the streets that are being paved? To combine, I mean,
I would like to,
Pine Street for sure.
on the terrace up by the shop, Prospect, Taylor, Brown, and Gove Street, those streets, I'd almost, because there's sidewalks on both sides, so they're really narrow, I'd almost like to take out the sidewalk on the south side and, either put curbing in, make it lawn, extend the road a little bit, and then extend the lawn a little bit, be halfway in the middle, but that's. But another thing too is on those streets, we have an issue with is the telephone poles.
Yeah.
So do we want to keep waiting and, otherwise we're gonna, if we put those off because we want to do the sidewalk, we want to move the poles. I mean, those streets will be another 10 years before they get paved, They've been like that for 20 years since
Yeah.
I've been here, so.
Which streets did you say?
Taylor, Brown, Prospect,
Oh,
and
go
Gove Street. At Terrace up by the shop. It's off of Lake Street. And I don't know if you guys saw it too, there's some of the streets on here on the pavement that we're actually gonna need to be reconstructed. Avenue B is one, material underneath, we did some test digs on it. And Avenue B, the material underneath it is absolute junk. So we're gonna pull the asphalt, take it down 18 inches and put in new material. And the same thing with Wheeler Drive. Is the same as Avenue B, the material underneath it is junk. Center Street, we're lucky the material underneath it is good, but there's only 1.5 inches of asphalt on Center Street.
That's amazing. I was driving.
And we're actually gonna take Center Street down 4 inches, so we can put 4 inches of mixed back. So some of the streets are a little more intense than, just milling them and overlaying.
right.
That gets a lot of traffic, that Center Street.
It does, and that's why it's failing, because there's only 1.5 inches of mix there.
Yeah.
I mean, some spots it's
People go
an
that way
inch,
to
some
avoid
spots
the
it's
red
1.5 inches.
It's crazy.
So that's another one that's gonna see a little, we can't just, mill it and then pave it. We're gonna have to, take it down 4 inches so we can put back 4 inches. Because of the height, a lot of these streets is the heights of the sidewalks.
Yeah.
You can't just overlay them. So that's why all of them, we're gonna mill them 2 inches and, shim them, then overlay them. And then some of them, we're gonna have to base them and then top them after we reconstruct them.
Okay, we all set?
I think so.
Okay, capital projects, major projects, train station, there's a article, an item in your packet.
A lot of numbers.
Yeah,
This is a funding stack to the extreme. But the good news is most of the, at least the initial work has been coming in and being approved. So Gary had put together an updated memo on where we stand with a variety of sources, and then there's some new proposed uses that we're going to approach the board on. Since we put this memo out, we did get an update from Wyndham Regional on the brownfields, the 300,000. The committee did award us 240,000 outright grant and potential loan for the balance, the 60,000. So Gary and I are going to look at what that 240 might be able to do and hope that we don't have to go and dip into any of that loan option for the brownfield work that's in that first phase of the renovations. But with that being said, Gary, maybe you can give just sort of a synopsis, because again, we'll get lost in the numbers here if we get too far.
Sure. So the good news, the exciting piece from the past couple of weeks, so the Northern Borders Commission approved our adjustments. We had to switch around some pieces with the acquisition, and they approved these new uses that you see here. And we got a grant agreement from them end of last week. And the ABCA, the analysis of brownfields of cleanup alternatives, we should see that mid-January, and that's the really big leverage point that we're waiting on right now. Once that's done, the state will be able to accept the environmental and archaeological work without knowing how we're going to treat the asbestos and the lead. They won't approve our documents because the historic preservation is a big part of that. They want to see that we're not tearing everything up in order to address the asbestos and lead. And we're not. I mean, the report will show that, but they need the details in the application. So once they get that and their comment period is done, that's the last thing we need for a notice to proceed from all parties on the funding. And we'll be able to move forward with the purchase. One last piece with the lease that came up is just approving the right of way for the road. Even though it shows up on highway maps and it's been used as a road since the late 1800s, it was never deeded. There's no right of way or road on Depot Street or the end of Island Street. And so we had all stakeholders meeting at the train station with V-Trans and Stantec, who's doing the platform design for Hamtramck, the improvements, and Wyndham Regional Commission. And at any rate, the short answer is that V-Trans is going ahead. They were out there last week surveying. They're taking care of updating those pieces. And then we'll be able to get the lease, and looks like we're in good shape to be closing and beginning the cleanup work in June, at the end of the fiscal year, beginning of the new fiscal year. And that ABCA, that leverage point, is the one that you approved last month, the funding you approved for that. And there's one more piece of the general fund contribution for this year that we're looking for, that's in a motion at the bottom. So once the ABCA is done and those pieces are approved, to move forward, we'll want to do that phase 2 assessment, which was recommended in the phase 1 environmental site assessment. And so that's a $10,500 and that's really the last piece we want. It's not needed before acquisition, but it's important that we do get that before starting the renovation work. I guess one of the things that this budget really points out is, in this process, has identified a couple of important pieces working with the state and the feds, and it came up with 66 Atkinson Street, and things we found there is engaging in the umbrella program, acknowledging all of the challenges that there are, and just planning for them. So with 66 Atkinson Street, there's a good plan laid out with best case scenario, maybe getting to work this summer, but worst case scenario the following summer. And we've seen that with the train station too. The original plan was to close last July, and all of the challenges that we run into really with building condition, environmental and archaeological issues, the umbrella program, we need to account for those, but also I think the budget for it, I think we've seen, and you folks have noted that the engineering line item in the highway department has provided some of this funding, and it has done to do with engineering on properties or a survey for roadways where Roberts and Paper is to get a closing. But really, it is development engineering, and so I guess it makes sense to plan for that, to expect it, and have that downtown development engineering fund. Another good example, the hydro company called us the other day with they're upgrading the security, the transmission areas, and oh, you know, the mill building is falling in under, you know, our new fence and our transmission wires, and we need to address this. And so, you know, and that building will be going into the Umbrella program and getting work done. And it's just everything that we're doing in this framework. It's not big money. The big money is in grants, and that does add time to it. But the piecemeal engineering amounts that are needed to get there, like what we're doing at 66 Atkinson Street and what came up at the train station. Just want to have it out there that it is the normal course of business in the post-industrial areas and a town that was built on paper mills and Vermont Farm Machine Company. And yeah, I guess I don't know if there's any other pieces you wanted to add with that, Scott.
No, so really, the goal here is this'll be at least, you know, we've already had an article, you know, the town has jumped in on a couple of spots and helped us with some of the preliminary engineering, which we appreciate. We did throw in a potential discussion of an ARPA expense for this. And then ultimately some additional general fund money for 24, which will help us with grant matches. So you can see you're going to get almost $1.2 million worth of work for, you know, our investment in the building will be probably, it'll be leveraging almost, you know, 75% on the dollar in terms of the return on that first phase of the investment. And that gets us to a pretty good point where now the building envelope is secure, the environmental hazards are remediated, we own the property. We're now in the coordination phase with multiple stakeholders, which, you know, the next real exciting phases, which people will start to see, is the ideas of the canopies and the new platforms and making those improvements, coordinating those, because there's also ADA improvements coming through. So there's going to be multiple, I think the last time we met out there, I think there was 15 people representing various state agencies, engineers, and V-Trans, and who had, you know, what have you, to coordinate all that additional work so that we're ready to deal with some excavation, because you're going to have to do some excavation on that site to improve things like water and sewer lines, as well as add footings for some of these new canopies, and also some of the platform work. So there will be excavation in some of the areas that are contaminated. So coordinating that work is critical if we want to make it even remotely cost effective. And then ultimately, the last piece of all of that will be the inside work, which is the interior renovations at some point as to how we want to reuse the space and potentially market it for you know, some productive reuse outside of just the waiting areas and the areas for people that'll be using the trains and the buses.
Question. Gary, as I understand it, we don't own anything outside of the foundation of that building, right? When we purchase it, we won't own anything beyond the foundation.
Correct.
Why are we paying for all the brownfield stuff? That's not our property, is it?
So the analysis of brownfields cleanup analysis is for inside the building. It's asbestos and lead paint. So that's part of the work that we did last year with the hazardous materials assessment in conjunction with the Wyndham Regional Commission Brownfields program. It identified friable asbestos hanging off of pipes in the basement on the old coal furnace, as well as the new, 45-year-old oil furnace. It identified asbestos in plaster, in glazing on windows, lead paint on a lot of surfaces. And so this cleanup is all on the building. There's no brownfields work on land that we're paying for. Although, as you saw with the Depot Street Bridge, the state on their land does not pay for the brownfields cleanup. So if there's a project property that we're leasing, they do come and ask the town to pay for it. But we're not expecting, we purposely, we put a lot of energy into not triggering brownfields in the land around the station.
Yeah, because 100 years of coal-fired locomotives pumping all that pollution out, so all that land there has got,
8 acres.
yeah, a lot of pollutants there, that won't get in our way.
Correct.
Well, part of that, I think, is that you want to coordinate with the construction platforms so we don't have to deal with, the excavating, right?
Yes.
Well, you'll have to excavate no matter what, because you're gonna have to put in new footings for these new canopies and also some sort of lighting.
Yeah.
So there
But
will be
that's-
excavation, but if we can do it one time and minimize it, the cost is much less significant than trying to.
But part of that is also coordinating with the effort because we won't be paying for the new platforms.
Correct.
So part of that is coordinating with the effort so that they can just.
We're
put the
doing
new
design work
platforms
within
underneath
their
it.
current, right, within their current work so that it's the same package of work.
So V-Trans Rail Division is doing the platform work, and Rail has a special dispensation. There's some exemptions they have where, they're allowed to, as long as they're not taking out contaminated soils and spreading it around, they're allowed to dig in there and work on it and have it all back, not have it as it was before. And at that stakeholder meeting Scott was talking about, we discussed how to arrange including the canopies, how to have agreements like the town has on the Depot Street Bridge, where the work, they can include the design and having the footings in place for the canopy, so we don't have, that's the coordination Elijah's talking about. But yeah, so
And then they can add the canopies later, once they're done with their platform work, we can
yes.
follow behind that
Yeah.
and finish our work.
Thanks.
We still need
Ready
more
to
money
move along
for
here?
that.
Yeah, just one last question. What is your anticipated closing date at this point? I mean, I know it depends on that other piece, but
Yeah, so we're looking at June timeframe. Late June, early July is our is the goal.
Right, so if we finish the NEPA, if we finish the section 106, we'll have all the pre-qualification work done. And then we'll go to closing, and then we kick off that next round, which will be, fairly.
because I think the taxpayers would like to see it closed this fiscal year since.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So we'll shoot for before June 30th.
Yes.
And the other thing about that is that the timing with the Chrissy grant and the interior improvements and everything being complete is moving towards the same timing as the Depot Street Bridge. So that whole area will kind of be done at the same time.
There is a
That's the
motion
bright
on,
spot in the delays.
there's a motion on the bottom of that sheet, so if someone wants to read that, let's move along.
Yeah, I moved to authorize municipal manager to execute agreements and authorize 10,500 for phase 2 ESA at the Bell's Gulch train station.
Second. Elijah seconded. Any further discussion? Only question I got, we got the 10,500, how you
Yes,
gonna
we do.
back box somewhere?
In our operating budget. we don't need to
Motion been made and seconded to approve the authorized manager to execute agreements and authorize 10,500 for phase 2 visa at Bellswell train station. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Town hall roof.
So, our roof has had a variety of different leaks and failures. So we've hired Stevens and Associates as part of our theatrical lighting project to also look at our entire roof structure to see what improvements we can make to make sure that we repair not only what's required to carry the additional lighting inside the Opera House, but also if we want to add a new membrane as well as a enhanced drainage system on that roof, so we don't have the clogs and the leaking that create the damage that you see on the plaster when you go up to the third floor and other locations in this building. So they've done the preliminary work on that. You need roughly 75,000. We're asking for as an allocation to help us meet the initial $150,000 worth of work that we have to do on fabrication and steel to carry the theatrical lighting. The total roofing project, if we did everything based on what Stevens' Associates has told us would have to be done, is roughly 800,000 for the entire roof. We're gonna look for, there's a couple of different sources of grant funding for the next phase, which would be strengthening the addition, strengthening the roof trusses to carry additional weight. If we decided we wanted to look at the cellular option, as well as carrying snow load and the new improved membrane for the roof itself and the improved drainage. So the first phase would just be that we have some capital money still unexpended in the current budget we would allocate. Plus, we're asking for, as we talked about ARPA, we're asking for some additional money through ARPA to help us meet that first phase, which we would put that out to bid in January, get that work done by March, and then in that first quarter, and then the contractor would then be installing the hydraulic lifts and the new theatrical lighting shortly thereafter, so that it would be in place for the next round of shows that are proposed for the year. So the timing on that is somewhat, if we're going to try to meet that goal, then the timing is somewhat important. So that's why in the ARPA money, we get requested that additional money. And we will then work towards, there's some energy efficiency grants as well as some other CDBG grants that might help us with the actual second phase of the roof project. We'll have to come back to you as we go forward with this.
Scott, I've seen a lot of conversation about solar panels on the roof, pros and cons, with the Conservation Commission and others. Can we split those two things apart, or do we have to make this, we have to go with the solar and the roof at the same time?
If you want to carry any kind of additional structure on that roof, you have to program the weight. And once you've done that, you're going to have to basically, they're going to have to install additional trusses to carry more weight. Help carry that appropriately to carry the roof. So
A lot of people think there are better locations than the roof of the in town-owned property for solar than. the
if
roof.
you don't do it and redo the roof, then you're never going to do it, because at that point, you're going to do another 30 years before this roof fails.
Right.
So it's sort of a now or never proposition.
So Gary, you.
Yeah, so just the strengthening and extra trusses in the roof has to happen because of the snow load that's gonna be on there with the insulation, right? Right now, there's no insulation, snow just melts right off, because we heat the roof. Well, the strengthening that involves the areas of the building that go, that are raised over that center area in the theater. The new trusses involve knocking out brick, moving steel inside, installing them. So the difference between, while you're doing that work, having the steel trusses they put in strong enough to hold the solar panels, it's not that much of a difference. It's a huge project, and it's not, all is not lost if you end up with a little bit of a stronger roof and don't put the solar panels on. So you know, the now or never thing applies in a number of ways. Probably in the longer time frame, the amount of snow and snow loads that we'll have with, well, no, that's irrelevant. At any rate, it really does make sense to do this project as it's laid out.
Okay, we ready to move along? It's getting late, folks. We do a quick thing on your proposed ARPA.
Right, so
So
I just wrote up a quick memo to talk about potential uses of ARPA funds because we have to have them expended by the end of '24. A couple of them are reasonably time sensitive. We'd already talked about replacing the fire chassis for Rockingham's primary fire vehicle. And then that, like I said, that takes approximately a year. It's roughly 115,000 by the last estimate that we received. And then we'll then after that program additional money in the next budget for all the equipment and other aspects to bring that piece of equipment back into frontline service. 75,000 we recommended for this phase of the town hall roof project. That will carry the additional weight required for the theatrical lighting and does not get us into that next phase that Gary and I were just talking about. 150,000 for the meeting house. That really grew out of the presentation you had from the historic preservation folks. And what that would be is a potential match for that first phase of that project, which is that foundation work. You remember they had multiple different areas that needed work, but the two that were really critical were the foundation work. In order to realistically do any of the additional work, you've got to get that foundation resolved one way or the other. They had proposed, two alternatives. The one was the brand new foundation, which was 500,000, and then the shell frost protected foundation, which was roughly 300,000. So we basically had recommended at this point a potential use of 150,000, which would go towards then a match if they were to receive Save America's Treasures grant money, which requires a 1-to-1 match, or other funds potentially they are applying for as well. But that would at least then get you that first portion of the $1.3 million roughly that's in all of those estimates for all of the work started. Because you can't do anything until you get that foundation set.
Yep.
So that would get you on the road for that.
If people remember a couple of years ago, we did rural Vermont thing upstairs in the theater. We all stickered everything and went through that whole process. At one point, there was 46,000 out of ARPA funding that was requested from Gross for their boiler up there.
Oh, yeah.
You may remember, I don't know
Oh, yeah.
where that's coming from, but it doesn't look like it's coming out of this. We've already expended the money here. There's 440,000. And the second question I have is it in this budget proposal that you got to do the?
We didn't propose any money for Gross. I think one of the things we'll have to do is talk to the village potentially about some of that potentially being ARPA or other types of funds for that.
Yeah. But I think they had it, I think I saw one of their sheets there, their budget sheets. they
Right,
had-
Gary and
they
I have
had
been
the
working with Marty,
46,000
so we're
proposed
pretty
in there.
plugged into what's going on with
So,
their various, their funding stack with their projects, so. I think at this point, I wouldn't propose any town ARPA funds for that. I think there's ways we can try to work with them in other ways.
can you just do a quickie on this, pit area stuff, there's a over map and there's another map, is there some?
Peter, are we discussing this all for the ARPA right now? Or we just looking at this
Finish
presentation?
line of the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to make a decision on this, in all honesty, at your January 3rd meeting. So if you have other inputs or other things you want to do, we'll need to definitely finalize this by January 3rd if we're going to move some of these projects forward. The fire vehicle chassis and the town hall roof, sure, are time sensitive as well as the train station portion. The meeting house is depending upon timing and I'm working with Walter on whether or not that could be held for a future conversation, just depending upon he's working on some other aspects of trying to find other funds as well. So
We'll just.
that was just for your information. That's what we've been working with the engineers
Okay.
on aspects of the pit. Just in case there was any question about some of the work that we'll be looking at for 23 and 24.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, I know Kevin's been trying to
Just a-
bite and sleep over there in the corner.
Separate, pit related, but, with the snow, they've been driving right across the road and in the pit. And so you can clearly see where they're entering with the snow tracks. Is there any way to just put the signs there and get up just?
Well, the problem is where they're coming down at is right where Bucky's screening, and I know who it is. I
I
talked,
know who it
it's the people that are renting from Bucky. They got a four-wheeler. Yeah, they're coming down right by where Bucky's screening. And I may mention to Bucky about it. Hopefully he would tell his tenant, hey, not to do it. And yeah, it didn't go very far, but yeah. So it's actually one of the guys that works for Bucky as well. So it's his little boy. I mean, they're not ripping it up, but they come down through, they go up, and they, you know. Just
And those little kids are not wearing helmets half the time. And I
Yeah,
just
I
think
know.
it's a liability that if,
Yep.
so, I mean, they're riding on Cambridgeport now too, so.
Yeah. Yep, I mean, it's something I'll talk with the manager about, and yeah, we can go try putting a sign up, but like I say, they'll just go around it or.
Well, I mean, true, but at least we put notification that you
Yes.
shouldn't be doing this.
Exactly.
And so, yeah.
And there was a question about locking the gate on the pit.
Yep, but I have to coordinate I'd have to let Bucky know and give him a key because he's got people in and out hauling material. He's got all kinds of other towns in there hauling gravel, sand out of there. So I would have to coordinate with him to lock it up.
And they're not really using that gate.
They're using the gate.
They're going from the north. Yeah, they're not going from the south.
Okay.
Yeah, they're coming right down between Hans's and the old gravel pit right down in there. I saw that, I was up in there the other day because Bucky plowed it out and I went up in there.
And also further in from the new entrance, I mean, the north entrance.
Yes.
Crossing the road right there, that's another group that
Yeah.
crosses the road and goes in that way.
Yeah,
So locking it doesn't wouldn't accomplish that.
no.
They're
So
not
I'm
gonna
gonna
do
get some signs made up to say no trespassing.
All right.
Right where they're coming down through. I'll
that. And we have a liability.
Right, thanks.
Just so we'll see the signs and like I said, I was hoping to talk, like I said, I talked to Bucky and it was his tenant. I was hoping it would help, but it didn't, so.
You can leave if you want, man. We don't
Oh,
have.
no, I'm just hanging out.
Okay, you have to stay awake. I mean, Scott had mentioned it earlier that you.
I can hear it better here.
All right, Kevin, you still with us? All right, here comes your shot here. Digital radio grant. There's some information in there.
Right, so the village is the applicant because of the way that the grant process works for this specific source of funds. So at a previous meeting, the village had agreed to their portion of this grant. The balance of the grant really benefits, the grant itself benefits all the fire departments, the PD, and also our highway. And really, the real benefit to us is we would only have to pay a contractor one time because all of our repeaters are on one pole. So they could go up, replace the repeaters. The radios that we have are digital. They were able to be programmed so that if we had a multi unit response, they can all communicate together and they meet the requirements that the federal government has in order for us. It's a P25 standard that we have to meet for radios themselves in order to be able to communicate. So the money comes from, the 50,000 comes from the USDA. Basically what we're asking for is to fund this $35,407 from the fire equipment fund. And really what that pays for then is going to be some of the unpaid portion of the grant. So part of the repeater system. And then we're also going to reimburse the village the portion that would be required for our highways and also the fire equipment portion. So the total of this whole project is $154,000. The Bellows Falls is going to be paying the $34,367, which covers the police. We're asking the town basically to pay the balance out of our highway fund for the $34,367, and then the fire fund for $35,407. And what that does is buy the repeaters, buys all the radios, and all of the required setup for this new system.
Is Bellows Falls including their fire department? Yeah.
They're part of that as well.
So they've got fire and police and they're only paying 35 and we've just got,
Well, don't forget, fire equipment fund pays for fire equipment, right? So they're paying specifically out of village funds, the police portion, which
just the
would not be
police.
eligible,
I
right?
see, okay.
And then under the grant portion, because the fire equipment fund pays for fire equipment,
Right,
we've
okay.
got that portion plus our highway portion, which is not grant eligible.
So do you need a motion
So I do need a motion.
and for what amount?
So I'm asking the town to fund the 34,367 out of the highway equipment fund and the 35,407.60 out of the fire equipment fund for the USDA radio project.
Okay, so I move that that we authorize 34,367 out of the highway equipment fund and 35,407.60 from the fire department equipment fund for this project. I don't know what it's called.
Digital radio.
Digital radio
radios.
project.
Whatever the hell you need.
This is actually a really good project. Yeah.
On the on the third page, it says Dulles Falls Village Corporation Police Department Equipment Fund is looking for the 34. So why are we?
They did that I just gave you a copy of what they had approved at their
It's their
prior.
motion.
Okay,
Yeah, that was what they had
so
previously.
that's the number you just mentioned. That's right.
It's the same.
It's the
for-
same. We
It's the
broke it
same
out.
for the,
Oh, okay.
for us.
Yeah.
Fire department's
Trying to
different.
figure out.
Right, and 50,000 is the max we could get, so that's why,
You get lost pretty
Right.
quick.
that's why those numbers are
Okay.
there, because we could only get up to.
We hear a second to the motion.
A second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the funding as requested. 34,367 plus 35,000, whatever, 407.60. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All right, most of the motion passes. Let's go to fire reimbursement ordinance update.
So, since we last spoke, the ordinance that you had previously adopted back in 2019 did not have this section for trying to collect for people that were delinquent. So we added this article for enforcement that would then give us the ability to go out and collect through a judicial process if people don't pay. The second piece of this is, way back in 2009, you had approved an initial reimbursement rate. Apparently you did something in 2019, but it was never attached to your minutes. So it was never adopted formally by the board. So the only formally adopted rate for equipment reimbursement is of 2009. So the question was, Peter seems to think that there's something exists, and Wade said he thinks he might have a copy, but so far nobody's brought up a.
I remember we showed that fire committee meeting that he had, it was $250 for a truck, and under that number was in there. That kind of changes the point where
Yeah.
we're doing here, so.
That's where we should be.
Yeah.
If we don't have documentation that will change, then that's
Right.
something we need to do now.
Correct. So that's why I brought this forward to say to the board, this is all you've got on, that was formally in your minutes. When I went through all of 2019's minutes, they were not adopted, the rates were not adopted.
Right, we adopted the ordinance because we did it at 2 different meetings.
Right.
The first one, because remember Dennis wanted the
Mhm.
money split between
Yeah. I
the
remember
labor and the equipment, so that was done, but evidently there was no minutes or no rate sheet attached to the ordinance when we did it. And that's what Scott just said, the
Correct.
ordinance sheet, the rate sheet never got adopted, so.
Right.
But if we go by what's here, that's not gonna be what Kevin just mentioned, 150 will jump to $200.
Do we know what they are? What the increases are from that?
Scott had tried to get a hold of the copy that
Right.
Wade had, but I don't know what happened with it.
And I don't know if he's still got the old one.
You had the sheet, and you have that up right there for me.
I thought he did, but we should just be using the rates we've been currently billing at,
Which of these?
250
250.
for a truck,
Yeah.
$50 an hour labor and $75 an hour for the firewood.
See, the firewood was never adopted at all, that I
Right.
got on there.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
the engine rate, we want to make 250.
Right, so we're going to do 250 on the engines.
Right. And then is, the labor rate would be 50 an hour, not 20, which is currently on there. And you would add an additional, fire inspector labor rate of, would you say 75?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
And the rescue and all that is the same car or boat,
No.
those hour rates?
No.
What are those?
I think we-
Yeah.
you can think of this, yeah. That's the old one.
Right.
So engine and tanker should be at 250, the rescue should be at 150.
Okay.
There is no car 1 or car 2
So we just drop that.
or the boat, but we do have, the forestry truck should be at 150 and the utility should be at 150.
Okay, so forestry.
So we should adopt the.
I'm gonna
updated
make the
ordinance,
changes and then I'll bring it to
And
the,
then
to the next meeting.
at the January 3rd meeting, we can adopt
No.
the rate.
There was no vote.
What was the
anymore?
fourth one that you said, Kevin? I'm sorry. So I got
Utility,
utility, thank you.
there's no vote anymore.
Who does vote rescue? Someone does.
Whoever belongs to the answer is their problem.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I see them out
Those
there.
falls have
practicing.
a boat motor in there, but evidently that got
Okay,
canned.
so we will make those changes and then.
Question is, I mean, I know already there's people who've been billed who aren't paying. Is there
I think they were
anything
done
then we can
verbally.
enforce it, or is it, it's too late, it was before this ordinance, so we can't enforce? Can we rebill them and then enforce it, or if they
Well,
haven't
we have a
paid?
bunch of past due that have not been collected. That
Yeah.
At some point when we change the ordinance, we're gonna try to collect some of those past due amounts.
We'll be able to do that once we change
Yes.
the ordinance, even
Yeah,
though they
even
were
though
billed before the
correct.
ordinance. Okay,
They'll still be covered. The rates we'll have to bill, we'll have to collect at the rate they were billed.
well, they were billed at those rates, right?
The new rates, right?
They should have.
The old rate, I mean, no, at the 250 rate.
Yeah, they
Yes,
still the new rate. right?
on the new rates, yeah,
The new unadopted rate.
yes.
Right. So I need a motion to adopt the updated reimbursement ordinance only. Prices will come in January.
We can adopt this now.
We're gonna adopt the ordinance, correct?
Right, so you want to adopt the ordinance with the
Then we
new
bring the new
item
one back, we'll have it
for,
correct, because it's gonna be signed.
Right, okay.
Right.
All right, I
A motion to
motion to adopt the
update. Fire.
Update.
fire services
Fire
reimbursement
service agreement.
ordinance.
with the
Right.
new rates.
So there, a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the fire reimbursement ordinance. Any further discussion? Being hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. There is a fire replacement apparatus replacement schedule in there for your information. You can see where we're going with that. And it's just something that we can do with it tonight, but just for information, so hold on to it.
Well, if you decide to replace the chassis, at some point we'll come back to you with the cost. I think Kevin's still working with the vendor on the actual outfitting of the new chassis.
Yes, we're going to Bull Levy Equipment team today to look over the existing truck to view its condition, and they're gonna get us a price on taking that body out and putting it on a new chassis. I also reached out to the manufacturer of that truck and asked what it would cost to build the exact same thing. They have the plans. And we'll wait for both those numbers, so at least we have something to compare.
Okay, moving right along here. Number 8, review and approve order bills and warrants. Take a motion.
Motion to approve orders, bills, and warrants.
Wait a second. Motion made and seconded to approve orders, bills and warrants. Those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Coming around. Agenda items for January 3 meeting will be the budget, the town
Budget,
meeting
sheriff.
articles.
Invite the sheriff to come,
Yep, sure.
like that.
Anything else you can think of? You got a couple weeks to think about it. Okay, review agenda items for a joint board meeting. We got the month of January to think about that, so if you want to think right off, we can.
Hopefully by then we have word on our next round for the fire. We'll have that revised feasibility study on there for
Good. Okay, other business, Rick?
Nothing.
So,
One second.
just a reminder that 121 closes 12/27, that's next week, folks, so it's gonna be closed from the 13th, and if they don't get that train in here before the snow comes, they may not get it till later. You cannot move oversized equipment in lousy weather, I can tell you that.
So it's gonna be closed all the time, not just during
That's
daylight
correct,
hours?
yes, round the horn, yep,
For this 2 weeks.
yep, 2 weeks.
All right.
Unless they are able to get it done quicker, but they're figuring 2 weeks.
School bus is gonna do that?
That's not our problem.
They'll have to
I
change
did
routes for sure.
contact Deborah, I told her to pass the word to the school department, they're gonna be closing, so. All right. Is, Bonnie got any
Sure, I
other,
recycle those, yeah.
any other? No need for exec session, so I guess you can look for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
You do.
I do.
Do we have a second?
Immediately.
I think you get a
second.
second. Motion made second to adjourn. We are finished, folks. Thank you for your patience.